Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Kirk, welcome to the show, man.
It's a pleasure to see you again, Adam. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, been a long time in the making. Always happy to host a fellow podcast host, which we'll touch on a bit later on. Where are you calling in from? Where's home base for you?
I'm at the worldwide headquarters of Overwatch Mission Critical based in Austin, Texas.
Awesome. Obviously, of course, a lot going on there. Out of curiosity, did you decide to headquarter there because of the data center movement that's happening in Texas, or just it happenstance?
No, fair question. So this is a podcast with veterans, and it has a veteran angle why I got into it. So every man in my lineage, as I'll probably get into, is former military. I had a brother that was stationed in Fort Hood, used to fly Blackhawks. And when I got out of the Navy in 2000, I ended up in Silicon Valley. So I ended up in Northern California. I'm not from anywhere. My whole family lineage, my father was military. And I would say I discovered it on accident. I visited Austin while on active duty and thought it was just a great town. When I got out of the military, I ended up in Silicon Valley. And then when it was time to end a family, I was like, Austin seems like a great town. And I was just lucky, because if you look at what's happening in Austin now, this is the new center point for what we're doing in our industry. In fact, the largest data center owner operator on earth from a space power and cooling perspective shifted their headquarters from Fort Embarcadero, downtown San Francisco, to here on Southwest Parkway in Austin. So Austin is a huge hub for technology now. So we just found ourselves at the right place at the right time.
That's awesome, man. Love to hear it. And you're certainly taking advantage of it. So props to you for that. So we'll kick off with a few just kind of like icebreaker questions. And because of the position you're in now, being a leader of a company, and especially one that's hiring a ton of people, I'm really keen on hearing your kind of feedback here. So first and foremost, as veterans enter, or service members enter the civilian workforce, and vice versa, right? Civilians to veterans. How do you see us better bridging the cultural gap that just naturally exists?
Well, it's a good question. I'm going to speak to it only from the optics that I viewed things through. And that's in one industry specifically called mission critical. It's emerging. People are now hearing about it all the time. But I think that we've been able to demonstrate that our fellow soldiers, sailors, and airmen can serve in the industry of mission critical, or data centers are now called AI. We could serve in this industry with the same level of dignity and honor and integrity that we did when we were in uniform. And I think that mission critical is a mindset. It was defined by real estate brokers years ago, where you could quantify downtime of technology by a loss of $1 million of revenue or death. I would argue that any person that has taken the oath and has joined the military, they already have mission critical experience. They've been pressure tested, gone through stress inoculation, and they have the ability to come in early, stay late, learn at the most insane learning curve. And everything that we did in the military wasn't measured on downtime. It was measured in mortality. So I think that veterans have an emotional range advantage over our civilian counterparts. And I didn't discover that until I left the submarine community and fell into the civilian fleet. And quite an acclimation period for me, because one, the industry I fell into was emerging, it's still emerging now, and not a lot of people knew about it. And second, veterans were just trying to figure out how we could get a job using our hands, right? So the Department of War is already one of the largest contributors to the industry called data centers or AI. And I think that veterans bring an emotional range to this, and they have the ability to relearn and learn at an accelerated rate. So I think veterans offer a lot. And as a business owner, it's economically efficient. It's financially accretive, because veterans don't join the military to make money. They do it to make a difference. And if we could give them a difference coming out and pay in proportion to their value with their emotional range, they could just move faster. They're more agile, I think, than some of the people that haven't been pressure tested like the military offers.
Yeah, that's an awesome answer. And I didn't know that about mission critical, meaning like the origin of why I got that name. So that's pretty neat to hear and understand. Kind of rolling off that concept that I just asked, again, especially coming from someone like you in your position, hiring a lot of people, hiring a lot of veterans in particular as well. How do you kind of recommend to employers, and also veterans generally speaking, how to better recruit, hire, and retain veterans?
Yeah. Think about it. Less than 1/2 of 1% of the U.S. population is in uniform at any one time. But today, we represent 20 to 25% of the U.S. labor force. And I think that if you want to recruit veterans, remember that they are purpose-driven, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't do it to make money. They do it to make a difference. They want to get paid proportion to their value. But my message is simple. Like right now, we have a business that's growing pretty aggressively.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shocked to recently discover that more than 50% of our referrals for growth come from internal, which means culture is everything to a veteran. We have to be inspired. We have to feel safe, not just to make mistakes, but to ask any question we want as we learn and transition. And we have to do things that are in service of our purpose. Those are the things that are fulfilling to us as professionals. So I think if you want to offer a veteran an opportunity and get them to retain the position, you have to offer them the opportunity to be, again, inspired by what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
They have to feel like they're contributing to something bigger than themselves. In the military, the mission and the crew comes first, right? They have to feel safe and they have to be fulfilled. And those are the three things it takes to build a strong, stable labor force that's predictable and reliable in the long term. And veterans are the best solution for that question.
Mm-hmm. That's an awesome answer. And again, especially coming from someone in your perspective who, again, growth, generally speaking, growth also in veteran hiring, generally speaking. So really cool to hear that. All right, segueing. I know you mentioned, I think you said 3, right? Kids in college right now.
I do. I have a freshman at the University of Alabama. I have a junior at the Citadel who's going to go Army. And then I have a senior at the University of South Carolina. So I have 3 and I'm still wrestling with them as I pay for their college to try to get them to understand that a college degree is about as useful as a taxi medallion in the next few years. So technology is changing the game, but you know, it's an affordable luxury to still be able to send kids to school, gives them someone to root for on Saturday. And, you know, they get an opportunity to be a part of the Greek system. Like I have a son in a fraternity, I have a daughter in a sorority, and a son at a military academy who's part of something, you know? So there are still massive advantages in that age group from like 18 to 21 to 22, where there's a lot of shifting and forging taking place. College is not a bad place for that, but it's not the best place to go get a career now. I don't believe that you need a college degree to go get a meaningful career that has a very high overall total earning potential. But it is not a bad place to go to create a network.
Yeah, I'm totally with you. You know, speaking hypocritically, I've 2 degrees myself, and I take the same approach. In today's world, at least, it's not necessary in order to grow a meaningful career and career path. That said, it sounds like with one of your kids, you actually did go through this process. The question here is, if your kids approach you, ask you they want to join the military, what do you do? How do you react?
Yeah, it's a good question. You know, having a family lineage where every man in my lineage has served in the military, we try to not over glorify the military, but this is the best time ever to join the military. We're not at war. There's no war on terror. We're emerging with a new, most advanced weapon, machine, and technology ever built, which is called AI. Yeah. And you can send your kids to the military for 4 years and not go into debt. And when they come out of the military 4 years later, they have a usable skill set of great significant value to the civilian community. So I think that when I sit down and talk to my kids, I tell them, hey, this is a great place to be from. The military is an incredible place to be from. It can be, as you probably know, a very hard place to be sometimes. I was deployed a lot, right? So it's not for everybody. I'm not trying to encourage everyone to join the military, but I do think it is the strongest leadership incubator ever created. No one has discovered or figured out how to rewrite the constitution of a human being faster than the U.S. military. We all know people that join the military, and everybody will agree that when they send people off to the military and then they meet them after they come out of basic training, they're just different. And it's the pressure testing and the stress inoculation we go through. So I tell my kids, hey, look, there's a lot of ways to build a strong platform to launch your career from. The military offers, in my opinion, one of the greatest tools and skill sets available to create that platform.
Yep, 100% agree. Well said. Awesome, Kirk. So we're going to kick off with your formal introduction, and from there we'll roll into your life story.
Wow.
Kirk Offel served for 5 years in the Navy with the nuclear fast attack submarine SSN 691. Today, Kirk is the founder and CEO of Overwatch Mission Critical, an Austin-based firm delivering strategic data center consulting and owners representation services to the mission critical and telecom industries. A mission critical industry expert with over 2 decades of experience, Kirk also drives industry dialogue as host of the Data Center Revolution podcast, engaging leaders on the technologies reshaping digital infrastructure. Kirk is a 2010 military top 40 under 40 honoree. His mission first mindset was forged aboard his nuclear submarine service in 1995, launching a career defined by high impact contributions to the data center ecosystem. Before we even kick off, I got to ask, did you ever have claustrophobia before service and or experience that being in a submarine? I've always been curious about this.
There's only two types of submariners. Those that feel a little claustrophobic and a little tight, constrained when they first get on a submarine, and those that lie about it and pretend like it doesn't bother them. I promise you, we all go through this acclimation period. You could be in a schoolhouse all you want before you get on a submarine, but nothing truly prepares you for immersion on a submarine.
Yeah.
And the pressure testing that comes from the crew, like just showing up. I mean, these crews are tough. They want the best, and you're going to be around an environment of really advanced and sophisticated people. So you're definitely going to be feeling the pressure of the limitations when you get on a 360-foot tube and it has a nuclear reactor on it and plenty of weapons and a crew of 110, 120 people. It's going to get tight real fast. So when you pull the plug and you're off the grid for 200 days a year, let's say, it gets tight. But you learn a lot about the people you serve with, and you learn a lot from them as you serve. So it's an incredible environment to be from.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I can only imagine. Awesome. So let's start off with childhood, where you grew up and what childhood was like for you.
No, good question. I appreciate that. So as I said, every man in my lineage is former military. I was blessed. My father, both my parents were the byproduct of the baby boomer generation. They were both the byproducts of World War II. Back then, you had a lot of people that weren't sure if they were going to make it home from the war, and people were just doing what people do. And the circumstances of that resulted in my father being born. He was put up for adoption, and his turns out the people that he comes from were also former military, but his adopted father was a former combat infantry Marine. Mm-hmm. So my father himself turned 18 in Vietnam, loading bombs and F4s, enlisted as an E-nothing. And in the Air Force, and he was married or engaged to a lady who was pregnant, and it was exactly what you would have thought in the mid-70s, right? And my dad ended up doing pretty well in the military, put himself through college, got himself a commission, and he ended up retiring with 24 years in the military. And I was born and raised on a military base, and I lived on a base until basically the end of the Cold War. So I was born in Mountain Home Air Force Base in Boise, Idaho. My father was a SAC guy, so we were in Minot for years. We were in Spokane, Washington for years. Wherever his duty station took us, we followed. But I'm very lucky. I'm the youngest of three boys, a brother in the Air Force, a brother in the Army, and then I have a stepbrother that was a Marine. And that being the youngest allowed me to kind of see, being raised on Air Force Base, let me see what the Air Force was like. By then, I had a brother on active duty and a couple other branches, and a brother at West Point. And I knew that I wanted to be a part of that brotherhood, but it just, those other branches weren't really for me. And it was movies like The Hunt for October, Crimson Tide, movies like that glorified submarines, which were great recruiting platforms for the Navy because it worked. I was in college. I did what everyone else did. When I was younger, I was raised on military bases. The best part about a military base is it always had martial arts. At a young age, I fell into judo. And then as I was introduced to wrestling around 6th or 7th grade, I just fell in love with that sport. And I think being born on a military base in the middle of the Cold War gave me the right mindset to be a good wrestler. I think being a good wrestler is what gave me the mindset to be a good submariner. So I went to college and tried to wrestle for a year and a half and just discovered, hey, this isn't my environment, or I just wasn't designed to sit in that homogenous construct. I wasn't learning that way. I just wasn't enjoying it, at least. So after a conversation with my father, he's like, what are you going to do when you graduate? I'm like, I'm going to go in the Navy. And he's like, why don't you just do that now? Being former enlisted and also being an officer, he knew, like, just get in the game. And then later on, if you want to be an officer, you could easily do that. There's a million vehicles for that in the military. They really promote trying to take people from the fleet, from the enlisted side, and get them the opportunity to become officers. So I said, what the heck? I'll join now. I'll enlist. I'll get into the submarine community. And if I want to stay, maybe I'll take a commission, or I'll do what I have to do to earn one. And if not, then I'll just get out and go to college and do it my own way. And that's exactly what I did. So I got some great guidance and counseling from other people before I joined. I got some good guidance on exactly which path to really take. and they kind of gave me some instructions. I end up running into a cob of a submarine who said, "Hey, try to pick this rate, try to do these things, and if you don't want to stay in, just as long as you're not married and don't have any kids by then, it'll be a really easy transition for you to get back into college."
That's
so
awesome.
I did. Yeah. Go ahead.
Before carrying forward there, curious if your dad told you any stories about his service or his parents, your grandparents' service.
Yeah, I did. I spent a lot of time with my dad's adopted father, a combat infantry Marine, and I mean, I'd sit down with him and go through his World War II books with him, which maybe not the best thing to do as a kid, but that's the generation that they were born and raised in, right? So I had uncles, that served in Vietnam, and I had other people in my family that I knew that were in every aspect of the military, both on the officer side and enlisted. And my dad did have some guidance, and my dad always told us at an early age, "Hey, if you want to go to college, your uncle will pay for it." And what he meant was Uncle Sam, right? So Uncle Sam paid for him to get his undergrad. Uncle Sam even paid for him to get a master's degree when he was in the Air Force. So I was taught early that the U.S. military was one of the strongest places to go to build your foundation to launch your career in your early 20s. So thankfully, having a veteran as a father, I had great guidance. And then have brothers that were being in, like, I had great teachers and mentors along the way. Without my brothers and without my father, I would have probably been a little bit more lost. But I had my guidance, I had my leaders, and they put me into an environment where they thought I could thrive. And like I said, I think being born and raised on military bases my whole life gave me the mindset to be a strong wrestler. And being a strong wrestler, being a strong athlete, allowed me to be competitive in the submarine community. And that was really important for me, and I didn't understand why. Because I got out of the military in 2000. I was an ET. I was on a fast attack, and I went to some technical schools. And when I came out of the military, there were companies that were really finding value in those skills. I was enlisted. I was blue collar, right? 85% of the military is enlisted. So I came with like a trade, and I put myself back through college when I got out of the military as a UPS service engineer. And I was in the field for probably the first 7 years, and I traveled all over the place. But my hands and what I learned in the military is what gave me the opportunity to grow into the role that I'm in now. So I may be the CEO of a company today, but I started in the field carrying a tool bag just like anybody else coming out of the military. It was a great opportunity.
Awesome. That's awesome. So going into kind of like where I stopped you there, enlisting, what was that like for you? I guess, especially coming from, the family kind of dynamic that you had. Walk us through that process.
Yeah, it was like people could explain to you what basic training is going to be like. You could watch any movie you want. Like, I think I was watching Full Metal Jacket, the night before I went to basic training, and my father had been in the aviation community, which means he went to Sears training. He went to POW school. And he's like, all I can tell you is it's going to be hard, but it'll be worth it. And they can't kill you. So he's like, just don't quit, don't give up, and just remember where you come from. Right. So for me, I think all those years I endured as a wrestler in the early days on my back, fighting to get out of my back, taught me how to, it showed me what grit does, right? So my dad told me before I joined the military, he said, you don't have to be the smartest, you don't have to be the biggest, you don't have to be the fastest, and you don't have to be the strongest. All you have to do is work the hardest. And the military really rewards that. I think that's my currency still to this day is hard work. So I think the military teaches you through pressure testing how to really put out. So wrestling helped me do that. And that's what the military helped. I mean, there's no greater institution on this earth that does a better job of training and forging young people to be strong leaders in the military. And I took a lot of advantage of that. I was a beneficiary of secondary leadership training growing up my whole life. Being adopted, you can imagine my father was raised by military people his whole life, which means that I was raised like a military person my whole life. So when I went to basic training, folding 45s on my bed was one of the things I had to do on Saturday mornings before I would play. So I was super, super acclimated to get into the military, and I was ready to do it. The pressure testing was nothing different than what I was waking up to and learning as I was growing up my whole life.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, as you should have taken advantage of that experience, rolling it forward to service. So walk us through kind of like what the pipeline was like for you. So obviously you had basic. If anything, stands out there, let's hear it. Otherwise, like what happens after that?
Look, first and foremost, I always tell people zero things special about me from the military, right? I was a very common fleet sailor. And I say that because I work amongst incredible, talented people that come from the military. There's people on our training platform that were instructors at Top Gun. I have a guy on our team right now that I served with in the Navy that later on he was an officer. He later became the captain of the Oklahoma City, later became a Commodore. Before he retired, he ran all of Navy Nuclear Power School, which is about 3,500 students and 500 staff. That's including, I mean, that 3,500 students is the nuclear program for the Navy that supports the aircraft carriers as well as the submarines. So we have incredibly talented people around us. I got former SEALs and you name it, all around us. So I've been around talented people my whole time. But for me, I just went into the Navy. I got into the submarine community. I got into the technical rates. I became an electronics technician. You know, you go to some technical schools, you go to a few of them, and Groton, Connecticut, New London, Connecticut, including submarine school. And from there, you hit the fleet. And you know how the military works. You know, 50 of us go to class, let's say 35 of us graduate, and they just rank you 1 through 35. And then they give you the 35 billets or the needs of the Navy, and they rank you through class, and you get to pick based on how you're doing. And I was fortunate enough and scored high enough to where there wasn't a lot of options for fast attacks, but I knew I wanted to go fast attack, and there wasn't too many bases. So if you're going to go fast attacks, you want to be at the submarine capital of the world, and that's in New London, Connecticut. So I chose to stay in Connecticut, and I had great instructors. And those instructors were the ones that were like, hey, listen, let me tell you, because every submarine's different. And I was guided towards a specific submarine. When I was in submarine school, I was a Silver Dolphin, which means that you're a part of like a parade group. You don't stay in duty. You don't stay in watch when you're in school. You get paid a little bit different. You wear maybe a little bit different uniform. You get a different barracks, but you have to perform, and they measure you based on your class performance. So I was able to make a top level at submarine school, and then from that I was able to score high enough to pick the boat I wanted to be on. And I got on a submarine that was doing a lot of really cool things at the time. And because of that, I deployed 3 times. I didn't join the Navy to stay at home, right? I did it to go to go be away. And they don't make submarines to be more to the pier. They're meant to be out in harm's way. So
break down what that pipeline looks like so that, you know, people could kind of understand a little bit better. Personally, I have no idea what the pipeline for the, you know, to get to what you did looks like. So I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So when you graduate basic training, you're going to go to New London, Connecticut, and you're going to go to, I'm not sure if I go to sub school first, I don't remember, but then you're going to go to your A school, and then you're going to go to some C schools. And the amount of school that you go through, maybe it's a year before you even hit the fleet, right? So you're sitting in a homogenous environment. It's a classroom with 4 walls, no windows, because everything you're being taught or trained on is confidential, or the classification is higher than confidential. So you can't take your homework home. There's, you know, and if you're not doing well, the beauty about the military is it teaches you how to learn. So there's an allotted amount of curriculum that goes into the submarine training every day, and every week it's testable. And if you don't do well in those tests, well, they could take away your liberty over the weekend. They could take away your freedoms. They could take away rank or even pay if they wanted to. So you're highly incentivized to learn and perform. And if you don't perform, you know, if you don't get a good grade on a test on a Friday, and you're going to get tested every week, best believe that you're going to be put on what's called mandatory night study the following week. So, you know, when everybody else is, you know, marching out of the schoolhouses and going and getting chow and maybe doing some PT or taking the night off, some of us had to go back and study even longer, right? So there's periods where you're going to have ebbing and flowing, and there's ups and downs all throughout school. But by the time that you're done with school, you're biting down on the bit to get to the fleet, right? And then once you get to a submarine, you're a nub. You're a non-useful body. You're someone who, on a submarine community, they're like, look, now that you made it through school, good for you. I'm sure your parents are very proud of you. But now you're here on a submarine, and all you do is you take up bunk space, and you breathe our air, and you fill our sanitation tanks, and you eat our chow, and you're in the way. So until you're capable of staying in a watch and contributing to the crew, you're still a non-useful body. So you have 12 months to get to a submarine to earn your warfare pin, which are your Silver Dolphins. You know, if you're a pilot, you want to go earn your wings so you can fly. And if you're a submariner, you have to earn your warfare pin, which is called the Silver Dolphins. And those are that was probably one of the hardest things I had to do. And when you get to the submarine, they go, okay, your clock starts the day you show up to the fleet, and you have, depending on the submarine, let's say 12 months to earn your warfare pin. Because going to school doesn't really teach you everything you need to know. It just gives you a license to go learn. And then once you get to the fleet, then you're heavily dependent on your senior leaders, specifically your chiefs and your senior NCOs, to forge you. And I mean, they don't hug you to death. They're going to pressure test you. They're going to challenge you. I think that one of the best things that they do is they give you unrealistic expectations. They don't give you enough guidance, resources, or support to be successful. And they do it intentionally and deliberately because they want to see how creative you're going to be. Are you going to give up when it gets hard, or are you going to keep driving through and asking questions? I think the submarine community creates some of the most creative thinkers, because once you pull the plug on a submarine and you go deep and you're out on a deployment, you go to sea with the crew you have and with everything that you have to fulfill that mission on that ship. And if something breaks, guess who fixes it? You do, right? Yeah. So you get real creative because you're on a submarine. You're on something that is designed to sink intentionally, but it's carrying enough energy to supply all of Chicago for energy for them. So it's a very complicated system. Life and death is a constant on a submarine. So it develops and forges a mission critical mindset. So every step of training, from basic training to sub school to A school to C school, is designed to forge you into to thin the herd from the people that lack the grit to get creative enough when things get hard. Because it's like anything else. They could give you hey, you have 45 days to go do this. And on day 44, they could reverse themselves when you're almost done and say, hey, we went the wrong direction, start over again. You don't get to throw your sucker in the dirt. You have to put the mission and the crew first. And those are the things that come from being in an environment where it's just forging nonstop.
Yeah. Totally could understand that, especially in that environment. It's so wild. I love to hear and learn about it. So in that process, you mentioned choosing your submarine. Like, first of all, how did you know what submarine you wanted? And secondly, kind of you alluded to it before, but I want you to kind of elaborate on like how you know you have the ability to choose which one.
Yeah, so they rank you in school, and then the needs of the Navy are presented to the schoolhouse, and they're like, hey, we have 35 kids that are graduating. We have 35 needs throughout the fleet between the Pacific and the Atlantic at any one time. And if you're number one in school, you get to pick between all 35 of those options, and then you go down the line. I think I was top 5. So I could have picked between Pearl Harbor and for me, it came down to, do I want to be on the Pacific Fleet and go to maybe Australia or Asia and do work out there, maybe be stationed in Pearl Harbor? Or do I want to be stationed in the Atlantic Fleet, where you're going to go through the Med, or you're going to go throughout Europe and maybe you're in the Northern Ice Pack? And for me, at the time, I had a brother at West Point, and I could still take the train from, back then we didn't have cell phones, so I would take the train from New London, Connecticut down to New York City. He'd take a train from West Point to New York City, and we'd meet on the weekends every now and then. So
that's awesome.
I wanted to be closer to one of my brothers, but I wanted to go be on the Atlantic Fleet. I wanted to be in the Atlantic Theater because I felt like a lot of history was made from that side of the submarines. I think those submarines that served in the Atlantic Fleet helped win the Cold War. So when you're in the submarine capital of the world, you're surrounded by giants, and everyone around you in that community has been a part of history, right? You just don't ever get to hear the stories of how the submarine community, but the submarine community today represents 55 to 60% of the nuclear deterrence. So there's different types of submarines. There's different types of airplanes. There's fighter jets and there are bombers. And there's 2 types of subs. Or there's technically 3 types of major types of submarines. But I went to a Los Angeles class sub where I could have got onto like a Virginia class or a Seawolf class. But I wanted to go to a 688 class. There's different types. There's vertical launching 688I class that, they do vertical launching like the ballistic missile submarines do. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be on a boat it was considered a projects boat. So it was doing all kinds of special things. And I got to deploy 3 times. I did a Northern Ice Pack run. So sailed around the world in 18 minutes underneath the Northern Ice, the North Pole. I did a Med run in 97 where I was gone for 6 months, doing all kinds of cool things all throughout the Med. And I got to do counter drug interdictions in the South Caribbean. So there's a lot of different things that submarines are used for. I got to do 3 of the major 5 components that they get to do for. So, and if you watch the submarine community now, I mean, look, we just had a submarine. I want to say it's the USS Charlotte out of Pearl, which for the first time since World War II was responsible for sinking an enemy ship, right? So submarines were launching Tomahawks when we were taking out Iran's nuclear facilities months ago, and they're still contributing to the war today. So I was really, really fortunate to be a part of an incredible community like the submarine community that really looks out for their own, and they pressure test their own. They only want the best in that community, and I was able to be a part of that. It was incredible.
Very cool. Very cool. And at what point in that pipeline do you understand what your role, and we didn't really necessarily get into this yet, but like your role in the submarine, presuming there's, of course, different roles within each submarine.
Yeah, I mean, the submarines are constantly changing titles and merging, NECs and stuff. But I went to school specifically for ET, so all my schooling was focused on being able to operate, and work around anything that was electric. You went to quartermaster training, you went to IC training for communications, you went to all kinds of different schools. So it was awesome because when you get to the ship's going to look at think of it like soccer or, whatever sport. And there's a lot of people that are maybe listening that were an athlete of some kind. And it's funny because if you look at, like, even my kid, when she got on the soccer field, she may have started in the back of the field and then ended up in the midfield and later became a forward. And then maybe again later on discovered that her strength was really in the backfield again or something. For us, when you get to the fleet, you're going to go to a department, you're going to go to a division, and then they're going to slide you around in that division based on your strengths and your skill set. So they're just going to put you in positions and see what you're capable of. And then they're going to they don't try to change you too much once you get to the ship. They just try to put you in the position where you belong on the ship. Getting through school qualifies you to get on the ship. Getting into the ship is left to the senior NCOs to determine which role you're going to play and where, right? Yeah. So I was able to work I had incredible leaders on the submarine that I was with, and they were constantly challenging us to stay uncomfortable. And it's not like I was drawn to certain things. It's just that I had leaders that saw the talent, the aptitude, or the potential that I had, and they would continuously force me to be put into positions where I was constantly uncomfortable, right? So learning how to learn was one of the most important things you learn at school. Learning how to adapt is the most important thing you get when you get to the fleet.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, that's super interesting. So you get to the fleet, and I guess that starts your kind of indoctrination per se process. Is that another like 12 month kind of mark until you're really
12 months? Yeah, if you don't earn your warfare pin in 12 months on a submarine, they spit you out and they send you to the surface fleet. Yeah. So it's a make or break. You have to do it. And look, every time we went to sea and we were pressure testing and ringing out the crew, every time we came back, we were spitting out at least one person that was like, this ain't for me, right? Wow. Being on a submarine ain't for everybody, right? So getting to the fleet was the first step. The second step was the clock is starting. And if you're a hot runner, you're going to get your warfare pin in 9 months. I was going to my boards at 6 months. But ironically enough, I failed my first board, which was, the most painful thing that could happen to me in my career. I mean, I got to the ship as an E4 and had my needs modules done to E9. I was trying to be an overachiever, and I was trying to get my warfare pin in half the amount of time they give you to do it. And I failed my first board. And the people that were on that board, I don't think they failed me because I didn't understand the technology of the ship. They failed me because I was cocky, I was arrogant, and I had an ego. And the best thing they did was humble me, right? And I was fortunate enough to have a crew and a command that had no problem with confrontation. So when they saw someone maybe getting a little bit over their skis, they had a method in how they would ring you in and humble you. And running around a submarine on your second board with an EAB on, trying to do all your lookups, will humble you, right? So if there's a submariner that's listening, that means I have to put on a mask and I have to run throughout the ship, plugging into an EAB manifold to plug in and get breath, and then move to the next part. And I had to do all that. So if they would send me all the way to the back of the ship to go do a lookup, I had to wear that mask the whole time I did it. But they'll slow you down and they'll humble you. And that's not the comfortable part, but that's the part that's necessary. That's the healthiest part. So I got to the ship. I still got my warfare pin, I think in like month 7. So I had about a month delay between my board where they gave me a second board. And in that time, it was more emotional coaching where I would sit down with these, E5s and E6s every now and then an E7, and they're not hugging you to death, but they're trying to make sure you understand why they're forging you the way they do. And not all people are built for that. Not all people will understand that. And that's okay, because not all people were born to be on a submarine. But
Yeah.
I was fortunate enough to be around incredible, talented people that cared about me, and they saw the talent that I had. And instead of blocking and tackling for me, they were really putting me in a position in which I had to rise to another level, and I had to grow emotionally and intellectually to be able to be successful. And I think that being a wrestler helped prepare me for that. And I think that that's what helped me. Being on a submarine is what created the foundation in which I was able to launch my career when I got out of the military.
That's awesome. So you kind of touched up until that first, like, 7 months, right, when you got your pin. Talk to us about what happens after that.
Yeah, they treat you like a human being now. You know, you're no longer a nub. You get to pick a movie every now and then. And but the one thing that I learned from that was, I'm not a big hazer. I never have been a guy that wants to, like, the prison style rules. Like, I went through the hard way, so you have to as well.
Mm-hmm.
What it did for me was it humbled me, and it taught me that it's not my job to be trying to be the obstacle for these people to come aboard. Life and the circumstances on a submarine are going to do that for them. It's my job to help identify the people that had the grit, and then help them and guide them through the same process that I went through, because there's only two types of people on a submarine: those that have struggled and found themselves in the fetal position one night when they're on that ship, and no one could see them, and those that lie about it and say they were never there. But it's a place in which you're going to be humbled, and you're going to have to figure out how to reinvent yourself every month on a submarine. The submarine community is not static. It's incredibly dynamic. It's ballistic, if anything. So the mission is going to demand great things from great people, and the crew is going to demand that you can rise to that standard. And if you can't, we're going to simply remove you. So being on that ship taught me how to come back from being on my back, like losing or failing my first board when I was a hot runner every week was a very embarrassing situation to go to explain to people who thought, how did you fail? And I was like, listen, I just wasn't ready. And it wasn't that I wasn't ready because I didn't know how to draw things. It was that I wasn't emotionally ready to be given the license to be in charge of other people. And I think that's one thing that the military does, is it really wants to make sure that people are going to be trained and prepared to be in a position to be successful. So I had people that were constantly pressure testing me to make sure that I could meet the standard, not only meet the standard, but help promote and guide the others to follow. So being on a submarine was one of those things that it's a make or break. It makes diamonds or it makes splat marks. And I was able to survive it. How about that?
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So walk us through any of your deployments, what that was like, in the sense of, or in the depth that you can share, even if it's just general, of like what a day-to-day or mission, set looks like for you.
Yeah, good question. I deployed, I think on average, when I look back at the last 3.5 years, is about 288 days on average. So I was on a boat that was gone quite a bit.
That's wild,
and I wanted that. I didn't want to be at home. I wasn't married. I didn't want to be, I was single, and I was ready to go out and deploy it. Not only that, but I found a lot of value in being in the military because I was making good money. I mean, I was making submarine pay, sea pay premium, all kinds of crazy things. And I was gone so much that you can't even spend that money if you wanted to, right? So I needed it, right? I was building a savings account. I knew I was going to go to school when I got out. And that first deployment was awesome. It was, I think in 97, I went to the Med and we were gone for like 6 months. And, you're doing cool things where I can't talk about some of the missions that we did, but they were the types of missions in which we were reporting things back to fleet. They were reporting them back as tier 1 messaging that made it all the way back to the White House, right? So we got to be a part of some cool things.
Was that sorry to cut you off. I just wanted this context is was that first deployment before you got your pin or after?
Or yeah, I got my pin on my first deployment. I mean, I was at sea doing sea trials. So I got on a fast attack, the USS Memphis 691, coming out of the dry dock. It was in shore duty for 3 years being retrofitted. So I met my submarine in Kittery, Maine, or Portsmouth, New Hampshire. I was only there for a few weeks. The rest of the crew was there for a few years retrofitting that ship. And then by the time I got to it, we were relocating the ship back to the home port, New London, Connecticut. So I was a part of sea trials, which is when they're doing all the angles and dangles and trying to break the ship, which is exciting, right? But also scary. You're doing emergency blows. You're doing all kinds of things. Have you ever seen a picture of a submarine, jumping out of the water? I got to do all the cool things that we did. And they really pressure test the crew. I mean, you're going through what's called a TREE, a tactical readiness exam. You also go through an ORS, an operational reactor safeguard exam. So you're going through months of certifications before they'll let a submarine deploy. They got to prove to the fleet, hey, if we let you go out on your own, are you going to be able to do your job and fulfill the mission? And that was my first opportunity to really see what a talented crew is capable of. And you're not really you're on the crew, but you're not contributing to the crew. You're not part of the wood that moves, the arrow, so to speak, until you learn how to stand some watches and you learn how to collect some skill sets that bring value to the crew. And that's where you really learn your job. So in that first deployment, we had an incredible deployment. I think we brought a Battle E back, an Expeditionary Medal back in that first one. And then you're a young junior sailor, you come back from your first deployment, you got your warfare pin, you got some chest candy, and you're like, hey, I belong here, right? And then they put you, in a little bit of a stand down. You're doing maintenance on the submarine for a little bit, maybe a few months of getting everything right, refreshing some of the crew. Then you go back to sea every now and then. We would steam at the pier and, pressure test the crew as we were at sea, and then take them to sea and pressure test them there again. And then you'd go down to do undersea weapons training and, off the coast of Georgia maybe, or go do some deployments, practicing in the South Caribbean. And then boom, they're going to send you back out for your next deployment. So I got to do the Northern Ice Pack run, which puts you into a really cool club or group. Not everyone gets to go underneath the Northern Ice Pack, and submarines have a unique mission up there. So I got to do one of those where there's only one reason why submarines are up in the Northern Ice Pack like that. And that was more for submarine to submarine type stuff. So I got to be a part of some of those things and learn about, if you want to read an amazing book about submarines, read Blind Man's Bluff. That's a book about the USS Parche, which is basically the submarine that won the Cold War that no one ever talks about. And there's incredible submarines that do special things, but I got to be on one that got to go to the Med and do what we do in the Med. I got to go to the Northern Ice Pack. And later on, we were brought in to do some counter drug interdiction. So in that 3.5 years, I was on the pond the entire time, just trying to figure out, what a submarine is capable of doing. Some submarines are delivering SF, some are doing all kinds of other things. And mine was trying to be a part of the counter drug interdiction task force when we were down there. And there's some rules behind what we're capable of doing. And we didn't break any of those rules, but we helped the Coast Guard identify and take down people that were trying to bring a lot of bad things into our nation. So each deployment was unique. Each deployment had months of work up in training platforms. They'd put us, we do simulation trainings when we were at sea. We were just constantly training. I mean, I remember leaving the military and looking for jobs and like, hey, this is a 40-hour-a-week job. And I'm like, I work 100 hours a week in port, right? Because you're port and starboard on watch when you're at sea. And when you're in port, you're on watch for 24 hours every 3 days, right? So when you're there, you may show up on Monday. You don't even get to leave and go home until Tuesday night sometimes when you're on port. So working a lot seemed to be something that I got used to, and that becomes the currency of the fleet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. So probably a silly question, but I don't know the answer. Is, do you feel the difference if you're in like a cold water territory versus a warmer?
Absolutely. So when you're in cold water, you definitely get a colder submarine, right?
Okay.
And there's a blue nose ceremony that I was able to participate in. I don't know how much of that we could talk about, but the blue nose ceremony is where they kind of turn off all the heaters on the ship, definitely turn the hot water off. And you get to be a part of a tradition, a legacy in which you're exposed to extreme cold, but not to the point in which you're going to die or anything like that. But yeah, when you're in water that's cold, you're definitely going to feel it on the submarine a lot more. And yeah, it's cool. I mean, look, there's a lot of, we would tie a piece of string from one side of the bulkhead to the X on the submarine. And then once we pull the plug and go deep, you'd see the submarine string kind of get loose, or a lot of slack would develop because, you're built on high 80, which is tougher than steel and less brittle than titanium. And the hull will compress a little bit as you get smaller. So you feel it, at every time when you're under the water, you could feel it. But as a submariner, the best place to be is under the water. The worst place to be is on the surface, transiting to where you could submerge, right? So I envied the people on the Pacific Fleet because they could pull away from the pier in Pearl Harbor, and a few hours later, they're pulled in the plug and they're gone. On the Atlantic Fleet, you have to surface transit for almost 12 hours because the depths of the water and the continental shelf and some other factors, right? So you being on the surface in a submarine is like, try to imagine putting a Coke bottle on top of the water and then watching that thing spin back and forth, right? So it's easy to get seasick on a submarine when you're on the surface, but it doesn't bother you as much once you're submerged. And you kind of get used to being submerged. It just takes a little bit of time. But I got so used to being on a submarine where I never thought that I was constrained on space. It wasn't until later when I was a civilian and I'd go visit friends who were still on the fleet. And I'd get back on a 688 and I'm like, how did I ever survive on this? I couldn't sleep in that coffin. How did I live with the smell, But the reality is the Navy's really good at distracting you with so many things that are involved with the mission that you forget and you don't really have time to think about all the things that are nuanced like that.
Right. And then of course you just adapt by doing it for so long that you just get completely used to it. And that's the new normal.
Yeah, that's true. And not only do you get used to it, you learn to really love it. I mean, I didn't leave the submarine community because I didn't like it. I left because it was part of my journey. I knew when I started, I was going to go in and do one thing very specifically. And then when I was going to leave, I wanted to take that skill set with me and see how I could continue to advance my career. I actually got out of the military thinking I would finish college, get a degree, go back in as an officer and get back into the submarine community and hopefully one day become a commanding officer. Something happened to me in life in which I missed that opportunity, but I wouldn't say I missed it. It actually opened up doors for a whole bunch of other things for me.
So yeah, walk us through that process. You might have just really answered it, and like when you're coming toward the end of your service, it sounds like the intention was really to just finish schooling, which you had started, right? I mean, so it was really finishing versus starting, and then to go back.
Yeah, I had about a year and a half of college under my belt when I enlisted, and then when I would go to sea, every time I went to sea, I would take a CLEP exam with me, college level examination program. I remember I didn't want to take analyzation and interpretation of American English literature for an entire semester. So I would go get the CLEP exam and I would go to sea for 30, 60, 90 days, come back and take the test and get the credits. So by the time I got out of the military, with my military credits that the colleges would give me, with what I had before and all the things I CLEP'd, I probably had enough credits to be a junior in college by the time I got out, but I had to start over I probably would have been at the back end of my junior year from a credit perspective, but they only accredited me as like the finish of a sophomore year. So I had 2 more years of college to complete when I got back out of the military.
Yeah. Okay. So your plan really, it's like, what my question is, like what led to you thinking about finishing service, but it sounds like your answer really was in that moment, you weren't actually thinking about finishing, rather.
So I had a period of time when I was on the fleet where I was like, dude, I love this. This is amazing. I could do this my whole life. And the thing was, there were a lot of people that were on my submarine that had been in the fleet for years, guys that have been on 3, 4 different types of boats. And a lot of those guys would come up to me and be like, Kirk, I've worked my whole career to get on a submarine like this one. And this is as good as it gets. So if your expectation is that every submarine is going to be as awesome as this one, I'm going to tell you right now, it's not. So knowing that I was in a special place with special people doing special things and how uncommon that was, it helped me realize like, hey, maybe the party is over here. And I had great relationships with my command. I had great relationships with my chiefs. They tried their best to try to convert me. And it wasn't that I didn't like the Navy. It was that it just wasn't, if I was going to stay in, I knew that I wanted to be an officer. Right. And at the time, there were a few programs that I could have went into, like Boost, which is Broad and Opportunity Officer Scholastic Training. There's all kinds of Seaman to Admiral programs in the Navy that I could have pursued. But at the time, by the time that I got picked up for one of those programs, I was like 6 months from being out of the Navy and I had my GI Bill and the college fund. So I'm like, I have a skill set. Why don't I go out? I could get into college and I can graduate on my own terms and go back in on my own terms versus being in a commissioning program where I was still locked in, even as an enlisted person. So I got out and I thought, hey, I'm going to go back in, but let me use this time in the civilian fleet to finish my school and figure out what else I've learned, what my capabilities are now that I'm in the civilian fleet. And the only thing that stopped me was right when I was applying for ROTC, luck would happen and I was diagnosed with cancer. And once you get diagnosed with cancer, the ambition for me to go get an MBA or the ambition for me to finish my school or those things changed. I mean, I still finished school. I was still applying, but by the time I got cancer, I realized, hey man, I'll stop. I got to figure out how to get my life right. And at the time, I mean, I was a patient of MD Anderson, which is the largest cancer center in the world. And at the time, my doctors were unable to guarantee that I'd be around in 2 years from then. right? That was 18 years ago. But try to imagine what you would do different in your life right now if someone called you, hey, Adam, in 2 years from today, you're no longer with us. What would you do different today? What would you do different tomorrow, right? And for me, it took me 5 years to re-engineer my entire life, although I was trying to do it in 2, because I didn't want to do something that could potentially be one of the last days of the final 2 years of my life. I wanted every day to count. So when I got diagnosed with cancer, everything in my life that was noisy, maybe it was ambition, maybe it was something else, everything gets silent, and everything, all that static in your life goes away. And then everything that matters shifts right at the top dead center. And for me, I realized at that point, I probably wasn't going to have a career in the military, because even if I beat cancer, they probably wouldn't let me in. So I had to go reinvent myself and be like, okay, so if that's not going to be my future, what is? So I spent the rest of my time, I still was in this industry, the industry that I'm in now. I put myself through school as a UPS service engineer for 2 years, traveling 150,000 miles a year. And I was obsessed with finishing my degree, only because I promised myself I would, but it didn't really matter or have any difference for me. I wasn't trying to become an officer at that point. I was just trying to prove that I could finish what I started and finish what I said I was going to do. So I did it more for personal reasons. It didn't help me get a better job. It didn't help me get much, but it did help me be fulfilled by what I was doing.
Yeah, that's unreal. So to kind of like break it down into timeline here, so I understand, you got diagnosed with cancer when you were already back in school, meaning post service, or it was during
I got out of the military, was going to school full time. One of my brothers got out of the military, former Air Force. He got out a few months before me. We moved in with each other, 2 veterans. We were both going to college together at the same time. We were just trying to finish. And I ended up working. If you want to know how I got into the game, I was working as an electrician at a historical landmark building that was used as a restaurant. And I worked there as the serviceman from 7 in the morning till 11 o'clock in the morning. And then I would wait tables there from 11:30 to 1:30, where they'd feed me a meal. I get a meal when I show up to work. I get a meal for lunch. I'd wait tables, put $100 of cash in my pocket. And I went to class from 3 o'clock to 10 o'clock every night, Monday through Thursday. I didn't even have enough money to buy for the books. So I'd go to class, and then I would borrow a book from one of the classmates on a break and run down to the library and take I'd photocopy the pages I needed. I was just getting creative without having to spend money. And then I finished school, and right around that same time, a company that I later worked for, I was in Silicon Valley working as a technician using my hands, and I got offered an opportunity to move to Texas in 2003, 2004 is when I moved. And it was a rotary UPS company that did a lot of things overseas, right? There's a lot of Europe is a socialist economy that could create a false economy by overtaxing one thing and then the other. And at the time, they were trying to go to battery-free technology in Europe, and they were using a rotary technology device to do it. So I worked for a company that was later acquired by another company, and they moved me to Texas in 2004 from Silicon Valley. And from there, I'd already graduated. I was working for this company. I was traveling my face off. I was trying to get into the ROTC program to become an officer. And that's when my cancer hit. And when that hits, the only thing you're thinking about is when someone tells you, I had 3 kids. My daughter was born months before I was diagnosed. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to see these kids graduate high school, let alone get married or, college or any of those things. So, I got really focused on what was the fingerprint or the footprint I wanted to leave on my kids' legacy. And I was very intentionally and deliberately focused on how I would parent them, knowing that if I was gone in 2 years from now, would they remember me? Would they remember the lessons I wanted to teach them? So I kind of feel bad for them because they got a really concentrated version of my attention, but it also paid dividends to them in the long term, right? So I got less ambitious about the military. Once I graduated college, a bigger company came to me called Eaton. And Eaton is one of the largest electrical manufacturers in the world. And I got picked up by a company like them, and I worked for them. And I worked there while I was riding through the trials and tribulations of cancer, and they were incredible. They supported me. I got through my surgeries as quick as I could. They helped me get through all the things I had to. And by the time that I was done there, I realized, look, do I want to spend my next 2 years here if I'm dead? And the answer was no. And I just kind of looked at it like softball or baseball or any sport like that, where I'm like, I want to get in the game, but I don't know what position I want to play. So I kind of started in the outfield. I was the field guy. And then later on, I worked myself into the infield, which is where some of the other strategies of the game are found, right? And, maybe I was a first baseman, and then I moved all around the infield until I got behind the plate, and the guy behind the plate is who's calling the pitches, right? So I learned the strategy by moving from, Active Power, which is now Pillar, to Eaton. And then I moved from there to another company. And I was just constantly learning. I mean, my attention to detail and my desire to understand as much as I could before I left was driving me to immerse myself into any opportunity that would allow me to reinvent myself. So I worked for one company and kind of used it as a stepping stone to get to the next. And when people would hire me, I'd be like, you don't want to hire me because I'm only going to be here for 2 years. And they'd be like, let's do it. Right. So I went to go work for companies that were focused on supporting me and allowed me to have the opportunity to go learn and grow.
That's really cool. That's an incredible story. I'm going to do a pin there, kind of like backtrack and roll forward again.
Sure.
So like in finishing, your service, for other either service members, kids that are listening who are interested in, becoming a submariner, what's your advice, generally speaking, to get into that track and succeed in that track?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, you have to ask yourself, what is your purpose? There's a book that started all this journey for me years ago. It's called Sinek wrote a book called Start With Why years ago. I saw one of his TED Talks years ago, and it really lit a fire for me where I'm like, why?
Yeah.
Why do I want to do what I'm doing? And if you want to be a part of something bigger than yourselves, the military is definitely the place to go. It's the only place where an 18, 19, 20-year-old could be driving a multi-billion-dollar warship, right? You're going to be exposed to the most advanced weapons, machine, and technology ever built. And by the way, you're immersed now in one of the greatest leadership incubators ever built, right? So if you want to be a part of something special and be a part of something bigger than yourselves, then the military is the only option. The military is going to open up opportunities for you to be exposed to things that you would never see as a civilian. So if you're looking to do something different than everybody else, I encourage everybody to look in the military. The military isn't for everyone, but it is for almost anyone, which means if you want to go in and be a part of something bigger than yourselves, I'm a member of a fraternity now that's bigger than any other Greek fraternity. I mean, the veteran community looks out for himself. Yeah. The veteran community really tries to help grow and block and tackle for each other. I mean, after the end of World War II, 55% of all the businesses in the United States were started by veteran-owned organizations. Today, when I started my company in 2019, only 5%. Today, we're closer to 7 to 10%, right? So I think that being a veteran will give you the opportunity to be an entrepreneur because it proves that you're a risk taker. Not everyone, less than 1% of the US population joins the military. So not everyone is designed to be in that. But if you come from that community, like I've never met a 35 or 40-year-old or 45-year-old that says they regret having joined the military. But I cannot tell you how many 35, 40-year-olds I run into every day that say, if I could go back and change one thing in my life, I would have joined the military, right? The military is an incredible place to be from because you're a member of something bigger than yourselves and you contributed to something that was life or death for other people. You literally took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution at all costs, including up to the cost of your own life. When I started my business, I started it with one thing. I refuse to work with or work for people that I would never die for again, period, full stop. So if you want to be a submariner, that's the tip of the spear, but it's also the unsung heroes, right? So you're not going to be hearing, you don't see, like I got Mike Sorelli on my team. If you've not heard of him, he was a Force Recon Marine who went to Texas A&M, got his commission, and then became a Navy SEAL. After serving on Team 3, he ended up going to Team 6 and later on JSOC. Okay, so that guy's written books, The Talent War, Everyday Warrior. He's been on Rogan's podcast. He's on Fox News almost every day right now. I get to work around some of the most elite people in the world in the military, but it's not for everybody. But if you want to be a part of something special, I have aviation boatswain's mates. I got deck division from the Coasties. My two co-founders are both infantry, bullet sponges, one 11 Alpha and the other 11 Bravo that was former enlisted before we became an officer. So the military is a great place to go to not go into debt, but still learn things in 4 years that are going to give you a skill set that's probably more valuable today than a college degree, right? Having hands-on skills, being proven that you've been pressure tested is going to be something that groups like us that hire for character and train talent are going to look for first. So go to the places as a young person that are going to forge your character. And there's no place that reinvents the constitution of a human being faster than the U.S. military.
Yeah, very well said. I like that angle, or that phrase, mission of hire for character, train talent. I think that's a really good way to summarize it, and easy way for people to digest and understand. I 100% agree with that. It's an awesome way to put it. So moving forward, as you're transitioning, you're back in school. What is that transition period like for you, military to civilian life? And I'll say especially because I did the same thing, where when I finished, I was in school. What was that like, being around, like 18-year-olds or whatever, younger than you, don't have that kind of life experience?
I sucked. In fact, I got fired, right? And I came from a submarine community that was high speed, low drag. People had a very high standard, and they didn't suffer we didn't tolerate people that a submarine is a culture that's striving for excellence at all times. It does not tolerate mediocrity. Well, that's a great place for me. I like that. I like being around those types of people.
Yeah.
When you become a civilian, mediocrity is a new standard. And I was massively abrasive. I would be trying to get people to operate at the same altitude and airspeed that I did when I was in the military. And the way that I engaged with my civilian counterparts was horrible, right? And my expectations of them were misplaced, right? And it took me a few years. It took me being terminated because I was talking to my colleagues in a way in which it was untenable, right? And I didn't know that. My professional maturity thought that I was teaching them and leading them and trying to grow them into becoming better versions of themselves. When at the same time, simultaneously, they're like, they've never been in the environments that I've been in. They've never really had to deal with putting their lives in the hands of others, and in life and death situations were something they just simply weren't ever prepared for. So for me, when I made the transition in the civilian fleet, I was about as subtle as a sack of hammers, right? And I was probably just as abrasive. Now, if I'm around another veteran, they get me. They got it. And they're like, yeah, I get it. Let's do this. Let's forge something special. But there's a lot of people that are just not ready for that level of pressure. And it took me time to acclimate to the pace and the rhythm that the civilian fleet operated at. And once you could understand that fleet, then you realize you come to the fleet. Like I said, when I described my background getting to the submarine, regardless of how much training I went to, when I got to the ship, I was still a negative outlier. I wasn't even as good as a crew member as the most average person on that ship, right? I had to earn my ranks, and I had to earn my path and my position on that crew by the watches that I qualified for, the things that I could accomplish, to where I earned their confidence, which ultimately I earned their trust. And those things take time, right? And it takes a different pace and model to get that same thing accomplished in the military. I mean, outside of the military. So it just took me time to figure out how to engage with my peers in a way in which I was less abrasive, and I didn't have maybe toxic empathy or too much of it. It's almost like Goldilocks. It's a little too hot, and then it was a little too cold. And right about now, it's just right. And I don't know how many veterans are listening to this and be like, yeah, they stumbled too in their transition. They were waiting for people that were going to be, hopefully, try to imagine it's like you're a quarterback and you're calling a play, and then you say ready, break, and you come out of the huddle, and people don't know which piece of the line to stand on. They don't know what the play is. They just said break, right? So it took time. It forces you to change the way you communicate, and it really forced me to change the way I engage with my peers, and I found a lot of value in that.
Yeah. So I mean, it certainly takes time. That said, people could veterans could take time and still not figure it out. So as kind of like a hindsight advice perspective that you can, now suggest, what is your advice to service members who are finishing service and veterans who are trying to figure out how to adapt back into civilian life?
Yeah, another great question. I would say try to find your tribe. Okay, so I spent my entire career from the time I got out of the military working for some of the best companies in this industry. I worked for Eaton, which is one of the largest in the companies in the world in what we do. I worked for HP. I worked for CyrusOne prior to the IPO. I worked for a large builder that just built data centers. I worked for Align Data Centers, which just got acquired by $40 billion from BlackRock and NVIDIA and Microsoft. I went through all kinds of changes, and in that time frame, I had to adapt and adjust and reinvent myself at every step along the way. I spent that entire time when I was out of the military trying to find a culture that was similar to that I had in the military, which was people that were willing to work with and die for each other, right? So it took time. And I found that I left companies because they lacked the culture that I wanted. I have high expectations of my leaders. If I'm going to come work for you and give you all of my passion and all of my talent, it has to be for a worthy purpose. Today, I give my teams the most unrealistic expectations, but I let them know that it's worthy of their time and it's worthy of their talents. And even if they don't achieve the high level of goals that we give them, if they fail in that pursuit, they still tend to arrive at a higher level of standard than their civilian counterparts. So my advice to you is go find a culture to work in that is allowing you to grow, and it gives you the opportunity to be fulfilled, which means you're doing something in service of your purpose. I believe that my purpose is to bring out the best in others, period, full stop. I'm here to help pressure test and push my teams to have the highest level of output and productivity. And we don't build data centers, we build leaders. And those leaders build teams, and those teams will either build data centers or they'll operate them on behalf of our customers. So my advice to you is remember why you started in the first place. Why did you join the military? Is it because you wanted to make a difference? Is it because you wanted to reinvent yourself? Is it because you want to be a part of something bigger than yourself? And if that's the case, then look for all the same things coming out of the military. And the closest place to find it will be another culture that is paramilitary like ours. I've spent my entire career in the civilian fleet trying to find a culture that was similar to what I had in the military. And once I realized that I'll never find it, I discovered that I had to go create my own. Yeah. So I created a culture where only 40% of my workforce, we're almost at 400 people. I'm adding 30 to 40 people a month, and less than 40% of my workforce are former military. But the other 60+% of my workforce think, act, and operate just like us. They have a paramilitary type mindset. And that typically comes because, you got people whose parents were in the military, or their brothers or their sisters or their grandparents. So they kind of get it. Yeah. But my message and my advice to any transition veteran is don't go find a place to work just for the money. Go find a place to work for the purpose, and find a culture that you feel safe in, where you could go make mistakes and ask questions. Because look, when I hire people that come to work for us, I don't hire them because they have all the answers. And I promise you, we don't give them to them when they get here. They're here to help discover those answers with us. And many of them are forced to teach us what they're learning along the way. So we come to work to both lead and be led. We come to grow our careers. This is the place where we do that. So my advice for veterans would be go find a culture that'll allow you to reinvent yourself, allow you to make mistakes and ask questions and grow. And that's where I think that you'll find your fulfillment. Not only that, but I'm inspired by working with people that are like that.
Yeah, very, very well said. And I want to give you credit because you used the word only when you said 40% veterans. I think that's a massive number given, just it's not easy to hire people, not easy to fire veterans.
The industry average is maybe below 20 points. We're operating on double of that. And that's still not enough. The beauty about the military and hiring former military is it pencils out. If you're a business owner, hiring veterans pencils out. It's more financially accretive because they don't need to be paid like rock stars. They just need to be paid proportionate to their value. All that they want is the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to lead, and the opportunity to be trained, right? So that's what we're doing in the military. From the minute I got to the military, I was in a training incubator for the first year and a half, nonstop pressure testing, right? So my message is you have to be addicted to growth, and you have to be ready to reinvent yourself.
Yeah, that's first of all, that's great advice. And that's something that a common thread that I see is certainly finding your tribe, then understanding that the value system, that culture is going to be aligned with, again, exactly as you pointed out, right? Similar to why you joined service and what service was like for you. That said, what you just mentioned as it relates to having an environment where you can grow, that's also where I see, or what I hear as a common thread, where veterans are in a system that leads to failure because that system doesn't allow for transparent growth like it does or like it did in service. How do you grow that kind of a culture? I mean, like what are some like key pointers that allow you to grow accordingly?
I tell people at first to take the binoculars that they view these things through and flip them around. And I say that because in the military, the first thing when you get in the military, it's a left seat to right seat cockpit mentality. And what I mean by that is the minute I hit the fleet, I showed up to the crew, and my job was to not only learn my job, but to begin to learn the job of the person above me. Yeah. And once I learned their job, then it was my job to teach the new person coming in behind me. Yeah. So we are designed for a left seat to right seat cockpit training up and out. Mm-hmm. When you join the civilian fleet, it's the opposite, right? They look at you as a member of the cog. You're a piece of this transparent, predictable model. And the last thing they want to do once that machine works is move you. So there's a lot of civilians. I mean, there's a lot of military guys that get into the civilian fleet and they get into their roles and they become amazing subject matter experts at what they do. And they get so good at what they do that they get locked into what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And they forget, or they think that because I'm great at what I do, this is what I should be doing. When in the reality is what they should be doing is growing out of that role. So even here at our company, like I'm the CEO today, but everybody is being groomed and trained to be the CEO. My job is to not be the CEO in the next 2 years, to maybe be the chairman or be a board advisor. And our job is to take we have multiple levels of leaders. We have a leadership team, which is all of our directors, and they only have one job. Their job is to take care of the field. Now we have vice presidents above them, which are called senior leadership teams. Now the senior leadership teams are to develop the directors, but also now they have to serve two masters. Now they report to the presidents of each business unit. Then you have the presidents, which are the executive leadership team. So we're a holding company. Overwatch Mission Critical is a holding company with 5 operating businesses downstream of it, each one with its own P&L, with their own LLCs. They have their own presidents, their own balance sheets. And each one of those people are stacked. Now, at the C-suite level, you're at the holding company. So your job is to help produce and train those presidents. And your job is to help get them into the C-suite. So from the minute that people join our jobs in the field, we're trying to teach them how to become directors. What's your roadmap to get from the outfield into the infield and learn the business a little bit more strategically? So we all start as subject matter experts. And then they give you a black belt as a subject matter expert. And then when you get into leadership, they take your black belt away and they give you a white belt in leadership. And they say, cool, now that you're a subject matter expert, now we get to teach you how to be a leader, right? So once you go through leadership training, senior leadership training, executive leadership training, you're ready for the C-suite. And there needs to be a clear path to growth, just like there is in the military. I knew that there was a path to where if I started as an E-nothing, if I wanted to be the captain of a submarine one day, I knew that path. Yeah. In the civilian community, it's not the same. When you get into the civilian fleet, they want to make you a transparent, predictable, and reliable member of their machine. And once you're good at that, the last thing they want to do is remove you from that machine, because what you're doing is capable to be repeated multiple times, and they could build a business model around that. That's shit if you're a veteran. What you really want to do is you want to get to a place in which, yes, you may be a negative outlier when you get there, and a year later you may be as good as the average sailor. If you're really good, you'll be a positive outlier within that organization, and our job as leaders to put you in a position where you can effectively drive that change. If we put you in a position as an outlier, as a leader, you could effectively drive the average up. So our job is constantly cycling leaders in different positions. We don't try to force them to be something they're not, but we put them in the position where they belong, right? And some people, it will take them 6 months to grow into leadership. Some people will take a year. Either way, they know that they have to be moving forward, and their job is to get from the left seat to the right seat of the cockpit at any one time, and eventually come out of that cockpit and start running, multiple ships as an example, right? So no different than the military. That paramilitary type culture is going to be welcoming to a transitioning veteran, a culture in which most veterans are just happy to get a job when they transition. Hey, I have a family. I need to get a job that lets me be a dad or lets me be a mom. I don't want to travel more than I have to because I just spent the last time in the military deploying all the time. And I just need to get enough money and enough benefits to be able to support my family. That may be enough for your first step. But the second step is now you want to that's like planting the seed. The next phase is cultivating it and helping it take root, because we don't harvest the fruit from the trees that we plant today. We have to play the long game on people. The military does that, and some of these civilian companies are going to have a paramilitary type culture, which you can fall into as a veteran, and that you're going to transition up. The expectation from you from the time that you hit the field for us is that the clock starts, and we expect you within the next 2 years to be moving into a different rank. Does that make sense? And our job, directors and the vice president roles, is to get all the vice presidents into the president roles and the presidents into the C-suite, so we can go build more companies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that absolutely tracks, and that is the way. That is the way to do it. So that's awesome. So kind of moving forward in your story here from where we plugged in, this kind of brings us to when you got diagnosed with cancer. I mean, I can't even imagine how you went through handling, essentially starting your career, growing family, and then, dealing with cancer treatments. Like, walk us through what your headspace was like and how you eventually came out of that and got to where you're at today.
Yeah, good question. I refer to that period, that chapter of my life, as being blessed with cancer. I think that if I didn't get cancer, I would have got lost in the homogenous construct that exists today for us. We were always taught, all of us, I'm a Gen Xer, I was told, go to school and get good grades so that you can go to a good college. If you go to a good college, then you can go get a good job. And if you get a good job, you could get good money. And if you get good money, you could be happy. And that's what I was taught. Being a cancer survivor told me that none of that shit matters, right? What I needed to do is I needed to reinvent myself. The aperture, the filter in which I viewed my life changed instantly. And I realized that my ambition was the last thing I needed to worry about, that whole homogenous construct where if I do this, then I could do that. And if I do this, then that happens. I said, no. I said, look, I may not be alive in 2 years from now. And if that's the case, I don't want to spend today doing something that doesn't inspire me, doesn't make me feel safe, and something that doesn't allow me to be fulfilled by what I'm doing. So I spent the next 2 years of my life socially engineering everything in my life to where if I were to be dead today, like if I got a phone call right now and they said, hey, Kirk, you're going to be dead in 2 years from now, I wouldn't change a thing that I'm doing today. Everything I'm doing today is 100% in service of my purpose. So being blessed with cancer, it was just a lightning rod that hit me and said, hey, be purpose driven and only do things intentionally and deliberately in service of that purpose. So it was very simple for me because I got laser focused really quickly on the things that matter most. I had to visit my mortality at a very early age. I think I was in my late 20s, and I was blessed with the ability to go like, okay, man, this isn't going to be, maybe I was in my early 30s, but in my time, I was like, look, I could spend the next few years thinking I'm going to go through and stamp my passport and check all these boxes in a linear way. And when you get cancer, everything becomes abstract. You're like, okay, so if they're telling me it takes this, then I'm going to do it in this, right? And it really forced me to break through that construct of what I think is a limitation of growing a career. And I said, I'm going to do it in a way that's more akin to me throwing a hand grenade into the entire model, blowing it up and starting over. And I, at the time, worked as a PM at a company called Eaton when I was really going through all my surgeries. And thankfully, I worked for a large company with great benefits that helped offset the cost of my cancer, but it also had a really strong management team that stood by me. A lot of them were former veterans. They understood that I was in a fight for my life. And I had to really get my mind around being able to deal with that emotionally. I think being born and raised on a military base allowed me to have the mentality to where I had the grit to become a strong wrestler. Being a strong wrestler is the only thing that I credit my strength on a submarine for. Being a submariner is a constant pressure testing. It's stress inoculation every day. I needed that to have the right mindset to be able to go fight cancer. So being a veteran, being a son of a veteran or a military person, being a wrestler or being an athlete, being a veteran or being a submariner, all those things prepared me for having cancer. And having cancer and making me go through the mindset shift that I had to, dealing with your mortality, whether you're an infantry, combat arms, and you were shot at, or you saw people around you that you love and care about get hurt or die, that's an emotional range because you're visiting mortality. So for me, I just used every opportunity that the emotional wave of getting cancer gives you is an opportunity to reinvent myself. I never had the opportunity to have pity for myself. I never sat down. I did actually once. I take that back. I did. By then, I was a PM at Eaton. I'd hired a lot of guys that I served with. There's a lot of veterans that are around us. And I had an old chief that I worked for in the military that worked for me in the civilian fleet. And I remember kind of having a pity party one night at dinner with him. And he just said, "Hey, Kirk, so they're going to take your leg. They're going to cut your leg off. No big deal. What marathon are we going to do once that happens?" I hadn't even thought like that before. Right. So it just, that's the binocular shift where I was looking at the optics of something the wrong way, and then someone gave me the right way to look at it. Right. And I needed that. It was a senior NCO that hit me with that question, and it changed the trajectory of how I viewed my life. And being a cancer survivor allowed me to remember every day why I woke up and what my job was. Right. And by then, you know, I didn't have all the answers. I was kind of moving in the right direction. I always tell people I was sitting in the right church. I just wasn't sitting in the right pew, you know? So I kind of had to figure out how I was going to reinvent my life around that to where I'd have a meaningful impact on my family and a meaningful impact on how I grew my career. Right. So I don't know where to begin. I normally don't talk about my cancer stuff that often, but I should, because visiting your mortality could either emotionally shake you or it could forge you. And for me, it forged me, right? Because I needed all of those things. I needed to be a cancer survivor to be a CEO of a massively volatile company that I spoke in front of Congress on Capitol Hill less than 2 months ago, along with another captain of industry. And I would have never done that probably prior to that, right? I don't think I would be a CEO of a company today. I would probably be lost. I would probably be thinking that I'd still need to be in this homogenous race where I have to check this box and then check that box and then check that box and check that box. And if I check enough of those boxes, I'll be happy. Instead, I shifted it to where it turns out I forced myself to be happy with the circumstances that I had. And as a byproduct of that, I grew faster. My output and my productivity was higher. So I had more value to the people I worked for, which gave me a higher overall total earning potential. So I just stacked all the things that could have killed me into a way in which I used them to accelerate my growth. And then I became addicted and obsessed with growth, right? I'm like, look, I only have 2 years to learn this stuff. Let's learn as much of it as we can right now. And once I beat cancer and realized that, hey, I'm not going anywhere, I realized I needed to go help build others. And that's what I did. So I stayed in service of my purpose throughout my entire career, building teams until I eventually left and started my own.
That's a really special answer. I think something that any veteran should be able to pull away from, just the general concept, which is you can take hardship and you can forge it forward, using your words, and forge, right, to your own benefit to excel, or you can kind of fall under the weight of it. So, just from a military perspective, I can relate to what you're saying, though adding that additional layer of, personal and psychological and health, that's it's just an unbelievable, perspective to hear from you. So that's a really special answer. Thank you for sharing it.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
So it sounds like you are also able to really leverage, like in a translatable way, a skill set that you took from service, that being electrical. I don't know what you would call it. Just what would you
kind
call
of look
that?
at it like this. I try to bring everything back to sports because most people have at some point in their life, whether they wanted to or not, their parents put it into them or they just discovered it because of some other reason. A lot of us could relate to being in some sort of sport. Try to imagine it where I hopped the fence and I got into the outfield of a baseball team and I learned how to play center field and I learned how to play right or left. And then eventually I got into the infield and I learned how to play first base. And as I was playing first base, I was asking the shortstop, how do you do that game? How do you play that position? And I had an insatiable appetite to learn. And I was always surrounded by people that were like, look, if you want to learn, I'll teach you. And I only went to go work at places where I can learn. And I was laterally transferring out of one role to the next. So I would go from one position to another company for the next position for 2 years, and the next company for 2 years, and the next company for 2 years, until I just kept getting to the point where I'm like, I think I understand this game now. Yeah. And then eventually, and if it was baseball, I found myself, as a first base coach. I was no longer a player. And the next thing you know, I'm third base coach. And the next thing you know, I'm the general manager of a team. But we all started on the field. We all started from somewhere. And I mean, for veterans, we're all equals, right? We all took the same oath. We all went through the same basic training. We all went through some sort of schools. We were all exposed to advanced weapons, machine or tech, or advanced leadership training. And I used all those things to help, be the foundation. And the military was my father's foundation. The military was my father's foundation to how to grow us. He had 3 sons. You better believe that he ran us like a drill instructor would, and at the end of the day, that taught us pressure. It taught us how to deal well under pressure. It taught us what stress does and how it helps us make good decisions or bad ones. And you have to make a ton of bad mistakes. You have to make a lot of bad decisions. You have to fail your first board and get humbled. You have to go through pain. I mean, growth comes through pain and suffering. Character is built through that process. Like even here at a business, I've never once ran into my CFO's office and asked him to tell me what my EBITDA was in percentage of dollars at any one moment, which is the number one driver for a business. Typically, our only focus is on retention, right? So like I'm constantly focused on not only how do we recruit, but how do we grow and retrain talent and retain talent? How do we make them want to keep that passion, that talent here, right? So using one thing for the other is how you do it. And I'm using a playbook from the military. I mean, right now in my book, on my door facing the outside is the top 7 tenets of Admiral Rickover, who's the father of the nuclear Navy. But all of those tenets are the same tenets I used to build my company and to run this ship. It's the same tenets I got from the military. I was born and raised from the military. My father was raised from a military person. He turned 18 in Vietnam, and best believe there were senior NCOs that were growing him and teaching him how to become a man. That's the only thing that he knew. He taught us. You best believe I teach my kids the same. But we train and grow leaders here at this company the same way the military does. I'm not reinventing fire. I'm just picking up where they left off and getting a page out of their playbook when I do it.
Oh, that's awesome. So kind of what I was getting at, and you completely answered one side of it, which is really the more important side, is that translatable skill element, military to civilian life. So all of what you just mentioned absolutely falls in the kind of like soft skills category, which is, again, the most important one because it is the most translatable regardless of where you go. On a hard skill perspective, what I was getting at, and I'm saying this as a question, right? It sounded like you're able to even leverage your like hard skills schooling as it relates to like electrical trade, smithing. I don't know what the right word is there, like directly into industry.
Yeah. So what happened was I was dating someone when I was when I got out of the military. I was working, like I said, I was a handyman or a glorified non-electrician, and I was going to school the full time, and I was dating a lady that was working in a company that was technical, and it was ran by the COO of that company was a former Marine. And one day he walks down into my girlfriend's office and says, "Man, I wish I could find some more Submariners." And she's like, "I'm happy to be dating one." Next thing you know, I'm working in their warehouse as a DVT engineer, design verification testing, which means that I was blowing the doors off of stuff. What this company was a third-party service company. So they would go get reclaimed technologies, bring them back into their warehouse, and retrofit them and resell them.
Wow.
Well, a person like me, they could throw, manual at me for a UPS for MGE, Schneider, APC, Eaton Powerware. It didn't matter what the box was. It'd be like I was a mechanic. They'd be like, "Hey, can you fix a car?" It didn't matter if it's a Ford, a Chevy, a Dodge. But the military taught me how to read complicated technical manuals and learn how to use my hands to fix complicated technology problems. So my hard skills were, everything I learned in the military, most importantly, not the skills of the technology, but what the military does that people overlook too often is they teach you how to learn at an accelerated rate under pressure. Yeah. So by the time I was working in that warehouse, they could roll any technology into that building. If they had a manual for it, I would solve the problem for it. Yeah. So having the hard skills and having the ability to use my hands is what gave me every opportunity in this industry. So I kind of stumbled into the right place at the right time. and that was the end of my, that was the beginning of my career, I could say, where, I mean, at the same time, I didn't even want to finish college at that point. I was only doing it just because I promised myself I would. But this industry doesn't care. No one in this industry cares if you went to college or where. I mean, your parents are probably really proud of those things. But what people care about here is, can you use your hands and are you willing to work hard? And if you can do that and you're willing to work hard, it turns out everyone here wants to give you an opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even as you just put it now, right? Like your hard skills certainly help, but it was really your soft skills of understanding how to learn quickly
Learning how to
or
learn.
anything. Exactly. Learn how to learn is really what propelled you forward. And that's just another story where I say there's no such thing as coincidences, right? Like what are the chances, right? That certain circumstance happened with that COO asking for a submariner, you're right there, your girlfriend, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an awesome
pattern
story.
has always been that the pain and the suffering that I've always endured prior to that I didn't understand was intentionally preparing me and training for the opportunity that was in front of me that I didn't know was coming.
Yeah.
And thank God I had, I was the youngest of a bunch of boys growing up in a military base where I took the most beatings. Thank God that made me a better wrestler where I could endure more pain. Taking beatings from my older brothers that were wrestlers was different than going on and then later wrestling someone my same size. I was like, as long as they're not as big as my brothers, I could take anybody, right? But being able to endure all that pain and frustration, being on a submarine deployed as much as I did, like the schools I went through and the deployments I did, that was not easy. That was pain and suffering. And you sometimes don't feel that. You feel the forging and you know what's happening, but you don't understand why. I just kind of was like, Jesus, take the wheel, right? There's a reason for this. And I stopped trying to understand it. We don't focus on results here. That's what I was trying to say with EBITDA or this and that. We only focus on the process. The results are the biggest distraction to success. The process and improving that process of how we grow, train, mentor, and teach leaders. That's the only thing we care about is the process. So for me, being in the military taught me to focus more on process than results, because if you can control the process, you can control the results. So for me, I just spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do I work on improving the process.
Yeah, that totally tracks. Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess like fast forward, going through those different stages in your career to really start in Overwatch, what was kind of the specific moment, the aha moment, or moments, right? It could be a few that was like, okay, ready to go.
When I was ready to go start the business, that's a good question. Give me 1 second. I have a hard time talking about this part only because it humbles me, but I'll do it because I think it's really important. So every man in my lineage is military. I've been around military my whole life, and I've hired military my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
I've always felt like they needed an opportunity, just like I did, right? So I think it's our job as veterans. If we get to the top of the hill, it's our responsibility to reach back and help grab the hand of someone else and pull them forward with us. So throughout my whole career, I've always hired former military. And I hired a few kids coming out of the Army. One of them specifically is one of my co-founders. And he was a bullet sponge. He was 11 Bravo. He deployed to Afghanistan for 13 months. This guy's been in hundreds of firefights and has seen a lot of attrition. I mean, he was in the most kinetic environment in the conjugal province of Afghanistan and sadly lost a lot of the guys on his unit, right? Well, when I took over as the president of Nova Mission Critical, which was a general contractor that did nothing but build data centers. We were building everywhere in America, every NFL city. I was building all throughout Europe and even parts of the Middle East. In fact, the only place I haven't been a part of a data center project on so far has been in Asia, and that's only a matter of time. But at the time, I would hire these kids, and I'm going to tell you a story that is a shit story, but it's the truth. Being diagnosed with cancer and being told that you wouldn't be alive in 2 years from now, I wasn't out doing hookers and blow or doing crazy things in my life, but I certainly was living as though I could be dead in 2 years from now. I was doing tons of triathlons. I was doing ultra endurance races, Spartans, Tough Mudders, you name it, because I wanted to keep my body healthy so I could be a candidate for advanced screening programs for cancer. The type of cancer I had is called sarcoma. And there's not a lot of success that they've seen with chemotherapy yet. So the only way to be a candidate for advanced treatment programs is to be a healthy candidate. So I did everything I could to be healthy, but I still partied, right? This industry is the wild, wild west. I mean, people are hearing about data centers now because you have the president of the United States talking about it on the State of the Union, but everyone knows what AI is. These AI factories are massive, and AI is just a data center, right? And I started in this industry back when it was Web 2.0, before it was the Internet of Things, before it was cloud, and now I'm riding it out through AI, and it's incredible. And we are becoming more mainstream. I mean, where the AI data center is today this is 2026. Go back 100 years ago to the automobile industry, and we're in the exact same spot. And to put into perspective, we were building Model Ts until 1927. So knowing that this industry is the Wild West, we're not heavily regulated with government oversight or a regulation or authorities over us, and in many cases that lacks ethics as a byproduct of that. But when we were rolling cars onto the street 100 years ago, we didn't have mechanics. We didn't have service stations. We didn't have part depots. Cars were the noisiest thing. They put the most strain on local infrastructure. They were pollutants. They were horrible. Look at them now, right? I mean, you know how many decades it took before we had seatbelts, and how long from that point did we make them required, right? So we've come a long way in the automobile community, right? And we build things safer, more sustainable, more scalable. And that's what's going to happen in this industry. But this industry is small. It's very niche. Everyone knows each other, it feels like, in this industry. And this industry was known for having a lot of really cool conferences, a lot of extreme networking events that bring people together. And that ends up having a lot of loudmouth soup and a lot of drinks and a lot of fun, right? And I was working as the president of a GC that was 90 years old. I just made president, and I had a rule. I mean, I had a lot of second and third generation people that worked for me. So one of my rules was I was done hiring family members. I just didn't want to have, fathers and sons and aunts and uncles and everyone throughout the company, because I just felt like it put too much pressure and strain on how we could operate the business. You were less agile when you were running a family business versus an enterprise business that was designed for growth and scale. So at the time, I had a senior PM that worked for me, and he was former Army. Now, he would ask me for months to hire his nephew. And I was like, no, thanks. I have a rule. We're done hiring family members. And then one day he goes, hey, not for nothing, my nephew is a war hero. And he's got a Purple Heart, he's got a Bronze Star. He's the real deal. He's done it all, right? And as a professional courtesy, I always would make time to interview a veteran. And even if I couldn't hire them myself, I would make a few phone calls on their behalf. I couldn't do it to everybody, but I would do it for those that I could. So I scheduled an interview with this kid. But I was hosting a conference party in Las Vegas. So needless to say, I missed the interview the next morning. Just a little too hungover, partied just a little too hard. No excuse for it. But I did, right? So I apologized and was like, okay, hey, listen, in a few weeks from now, we'll get you back on my dance card, and we'll get that interview locked in. And when we're done, the kid was working for a mechanical contractor, had been out of the Army only for a few months at that time. And I said, I'll know what I'll do. I'll call one of the mechanical contracting companies that works for us, and I'll let them know they should hire, or at least take a look at this kid. I feel like he was worth scratching the paint on, right? So a few weeks later, I'm hosting another, event, industry event that involved a lot of partying. And the next morning I woke up and I almost missed that interview. Okay. But I made it. I barely made it. I remember I was so blindly hungover, I could barely even open my eyes, but I promised this kid I would listen to him. And when I was done, I'd make a few phone calls for him. And that was about it. And I ended up talking to this kid. And the last thing he says to me is, I'm getting ready to pawn him off, is he's like, hey, Mr. Offel, if you give me this one chance, I'll outwork everybody that you know. And as I've explained to you, hard work is my currency. So I made a phone call to a couple of guys and said, hey, we're going to hire him. I know we don't need another superintendent. Put him on the program and teach him. This kid doesn't get to walk into a construction trailer before 3 p.m. He needs to walk around with the foreman and the trade, all the supers. His job is to understand every divisional line breakdown on a CSI, right? And I'm like, he needs to understand everything. So he should be walking a job site. And I said, hey, look, if you like to work hard, just know this. I'm going to fly you out to this program. You're going to work there for the next 6 months. I'll only fly you home once a month. The rest of the time you're learning through immersion. And look, this guy was used to, deploying for months at a time. Coming home once a month was no big deal, right? So he's like, I got you. And I put him into this program, and I kept an eye on him, but he was pretty far removed from me. And I made sure that he was always put into positions in which it was a pressure moment for him. It was either going to make the diamond out of him or the splat mark, because he likes to work hard, and I wanted to see what the limits of that would be, right? Fast forward, this kid has worked for us for years. I left and I went to a different company. And when I left, some of those guys went and got placed at other companies, maybe an Oracle, maybe an operator, it didn't matter. And I hired this kid back. I'd known him for years. He'd worked under the ranks for years, and I brought him on as a director for me directly. And he worked for me for a few years until one day he goes, hey, I'm going to go meet with some of my Army buddies that I served with. I haven't seen them since I was in Afghanistan in some cases, but I'd like to take Friday off. I'm going to go meet them in Vegas and have a little reunion with my unit. So naturally, I'm like, hey, man, here's $1,000 allowance on your Amex card for, go buy all your boys a drink and let them know if they want to get in the data center game, bring them our direction. We'll find a home for them, right? And he did. He went and he met with his team. I didn't know much about it other than he was going to meet with his old team. I literally didn't know anything about it. And it wasn't until a few years later from that where I was sitting down having dinner with him, where he had told me that the night before I interviewed him, he was at a high risk to himself, meaning that someone had walked in on him and he may or may not have had a weapon, and he may or may not have been willing to do something because he had gotten out of the Army. He was a part of something incredibly significant. He had been a part of life and death at the most extreme levels you could imagine. And he had seen his best friend blown up and become a triple amputee instantly in a firefight. And I didn't know it, but those guys that he went to go reunite with were guys that were injured in that last firefight, and he hadn't seen many of them for a long time. Now, when he got out of the military, he was just trying to find a home. He was just trying to find a place to feed his family. So he found a skill set as an HVAC guy, and he got into the mechanical trades. Well, imagine working on the rooftop in Ohio at 20 degrees or 12 degrees, freezing your butt off. You're not making a lot of money. You're not making a lot of difference. And it can be very disenchanting, right? And I didn't realize the struggle that young man had until years later when he had told me this story. Within a month of him telling me that story, I had left where I was at. Within a few weeks of him telling me that story, I realized how many other veterans did I miss because I was out partying, because I was out having a good time, because I had that right, because I may not have been around in 2 years from now, right? So I changed my mentality to where life is too short. I'm going to enjoy every moment. I'm going to grow every moment to life is too short, and I can't afford to party anymore because I can't afford to miss another interview with another veteran. How many times did I miss an interview with another veteran that I never talked to, and potentially they were at a large risk of harming themselves? So I went in and I told my CEO that I was resigning, and he thought I was having a midlife crisis. This is 6 years ago. I was one of the highest paid employees at that company. I had some of the largest amount of shares of that company, and I was making more money than I deserve. And I had a great job. I was the executive vice president for a data center operator, and I was deploying a couple $1 million a day. And at the time, I just told him, I said, I don't want to work here anymore. I'm no longer fulfilled by what I'm doing. I'm going to go create a company, and the only purpose of that company is to stop the cycle of suicide within the veteran community. And the other co-founder I brought in is another Army guy that I had hired, who again has been in months of sustained combat and has seen a lot of death. And he too was at a high risk of harming himself. So I brought these two veterans together and said, hey, I don't know what we're going to do just yet, but we're going to go create a company that is going to create an opportunity to backfill as many positions as we can of new souls transitioning out of the military. And we're going to make sure that we stop the cycle of suicide within the veteran community. At the time when we started this company, as you know, 22 veterans were killing themselves in 2019. That number today is 17, but that number is still 17 too many. This year alone, I've had 4 members of my team all threaten to harm themselves, members of my field team. Sadly, all of those are veterans. And thankfully for all of those people, they haven't harmed themselves. We've intervened and we've given them the support that they need to get through this chapter of their lives. And I think that a lot of the people that come work for us, they believe in what we believe in. They want to contribute to helping stop the cycle of suicide within the veteran community. We believe the only way you could do that is by providing them an opportunity to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Like I said, they don't join the military to make money. They do it to make a difference. And I think that this industry that we're in, that's emerging into the mainstream, has the ability to have a greater impact on humanity since powered flight. So when we see veterans, I'm like, look, the Department of War already represents 1 out of 4 members of this industry. It's growing to 1 out of 3. This industry not only finds value in their skill set, but it wants them deeply. So I'm just helping align veterans transition out of the military into jobs in an emerging industry that have not only the ability to give them a high overall total earning potential, but the growth is unlimited. Look at me. I was an E-nothing on a submarine, nothing special, regular fleet sailor. Came out of the military, used my hands as a UPS service engineer for years. And then because I was working on equipment that was adjacent to other components, I would just ask questions about the other parts of the stack until I eventually understood everything that went into building a data center. And once I did that, I was like, look, man, there's a lot of people that have a high emotional range that could bring a lot of value to this industry immediately. This industry is starving for talent. It's 500,000 people short today. And the beauty about transitioning military is experience doesn't matter in this industry. It doesn't, because the way that you use technology today is different than the way you used it a year ago. And it's going to be a lot different in a year from now, which means the way that we build and deploy data centers isn't the same today as we did a year ago, and it's not going to be the same in a year from now. So the experience value doesn't matter. This industry, the soup isn't done cooking. It's all still blue sky, right? So what I'm saying is we're just looking for people that have the ability to learn at an accelerated rate and have the capability of reinventing themselves. And it turns out that's all that you're trained to do in the military, is to reinvent yourself. You're trained to get to your role, get good at it, learn the role of the person above you, and then teach your role to the person below you so you could advance. And we created a culture that's very much like the military. We started this business because we know that the industry is starving for talent. And right now we have 15 to 20,000 people leaving the military every month. And a lot of those people have been exposed to some of the most advanced weapons, machine, and tech ever built. They also have been exposed to extreme leadership. So if we can hire that character and put them in a position in which we could teach them the language or the lexicon of this industry, they could go out and make a difference. And we started this business with one purpose. There was 3 of us founders, only 2 of us we could employ, only one business unit, and we had 0 customers. And today, we're at more than 400 people, growing 30 to 40 a month. Some of our clients are the largest hyperscalers in the world, and we work on the biggest programs in the world. I have a team of 100 to 150 people right now working on Stargate. Stargate is the Manhattan project of our generation. It's the largest construction program ever listed before, right? And there are other programs that are bigger than that are coming. And guess what? We're going to be on those programs too. So I think this industry offers transitioning veterans to have the opportunity to be a part of something meaningful and significant that'll have not only an impact on the communities they live in, but society overall. This industry will have an impact on humanity globally. And it's not every day you get to be a part of that. And veterans, people with military experience, are in greater value to this industry than people coming out of college. So if you're coming from the trades or you're coming from the military, this industry is starving for you. If you're coming from college, there's not much we could do for you unless you're willing to reinvent yourself and start at the beginning. I'm not saying all college degrees are worthless in this space, but most college degrees aren't going to help you in this space. What's going to help you is the ability to learn at an accelerated rate and teach other people. And again, you don't learn to do that in college. You learn to do that in the military.
Soft skills.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an unbelievable story. I want to kind of expand on one thing in particular, which is kind of the thesis or the significant point of that story, which is mental health, really. So I've had other veteran guests on the show who are focused on health, mental health in general for our space that is in construction, which is a huge issue. I didn't know of that until I was made aware. And then you compound veteran, mental health, generally speaking, on top of that. So twofold question here is, one is how do you have a program, or how did you know, generally speaking, internal to your company today, which is at scale, that you did have, employees who are having issues, and then what kind of programs you have to support that?
Yeah, we very much keep it simple. Good question. And that's the most important question. I was asked that the first month I started this business. I went and spoke at a conference, and I had another veteran in the audience in the Q&A section who asked me, what do I do knowing that you have a lot of combat arms people transitioning out of the military that are high risk to themselves, knowing that the construction industry is already an industry that is very high risk for suicide? Yeah. I said, it's simple. We make them feel safe. That's it. We make them feel safe to ask questions, to make mistakes, to grow and to learn. Right? We don't hire people with all the answers, and we don't give them to them once they get here. We just give them the opportunity to be safe. So if we put them in an environment with other people that are like them, it's the steel that sharpens steel, right? And we make them feel safe. The only thing you could do to get someone to not hurt themselves is to give them hope and to make them feel safe. So the first thing we do is we focus hard on making sure that everyone knows that they're a part of something that's bigger than themselves. The mission and the command that we operate at is to save lives. We only have one job, and that's to change souls. We know that by giving people new jobs, you're giving them a new life, a new opportunity to reinvent themselves, gives them hope. So I say the only thing we can offer them to help keep them from harming themselves is we make them feel safe. And today, like I said, I'm never going to not battle the circumstances of war with the veterans that we hire. But I have learned that as long as we make them feel safe and allow them to be a part of something bigger than themselves, we can make sure that they don't harm themselves. And they all know that when they come here to work, they're coming here to work to change and save the lives of other transitioning veterans. I can't think of anything. I think it's a privilege to work here. I'm lucky to get to work for a company that gets to go operate under one purpose, and that is to change lives. And I believe that giving people new jobs is the best way to change their life.
Yeah, that's really awesome. That's awesome. In your kind of pathway to today, what are some kind of critical moments that allowed you to get to that next level of scale of growth, both on a kind of like a financial perspective and then also on like on an operational perspective, like an advice kind of thought process?
Yeah. So shifting back to from a veterans to an entrepreneurial mindset is like a business companies. There's only one reason why companies don't scale, and it's never has something to do with cost or capital or finance. It has everything to do with infrastructure. And that infrastructure sometimes is confusing, right? Growth is when you grow a business, that's the same way of saying I'm breaking a business, right? So I'm constantly growing, which means I'm constantly breaking it. Yeah. Just as quick as my team will strive to solve a problem, our growth of scale breaks whatever that solution was and makes it obsolete. So you need people that are addicted to that change, right? And from a growth perspective, infrastructure is the only way to scale. And when I say infrastructure, I don't mean back of house technology apps, which are obviously massively required, but I mean structure of growth of leadership, right? So we believe that if we build a technology incubator for labor like what we have, we offer talent as a service. It's just like plumbing. When you have a pipe break at your house, you're going to call a plumber. You don't care who shows up. You just care that it's a plumber that's been certified and trained. And it's the same for electricians. We order those talents as a service. Data centers are no different. We want to provide a homogeneous level of talent that everyone could understand. To do that, we have to build one that's scalable, which means I need the management infrastructure to be designed to scale. So for every director, I put no more than 25 people under a director. So if I hire 25 to 50 people a month, I'm hiring 2 more directors a month. And I could only put so many directors under vice presidents, only so many vice presidents under presidents. So we designed our infrastructure of leadership to scale. It's never a function of economics. It's a function of how you build your team. Unfortunately, I mean, just like the automobile industry, we went from 1900 to 1929, where we created 3.7 million new jobs. 80% of those jobs came from small businesses. So right now, 75% of our entire ecosystem for the data center space is 75% small businesses. So we have to build businesses that can scale, right? So too many companies build the enterprise around the founder, as an example. I've designed this entire business to where if I got hit by a car today, this team wouldn't miss a step, and this business wouldn't. It would probably feel sad for me for a little bit, but it wouldn't take a break, right? It would continue to move on because the mission and the purpose of this business transcends far beyond me or any other founder here, right? So we build the infrastructure from a leadership and management team to scale, and then we went out and we found the capital. So imagine we built the rocket, and then we went out and got capital so that we could get fuel for that rocket, right? So for me, I'm trying to figure out, how do I build a transparent, predictable, and reliable labor force that people will buy? That's simple. I mean, you're in building, you're in construction. So what we know is, like in this industry, there's only 5 phases of a data center life cycle. The first phase is the development side. Development is where you got to go buy a piece of land and make a business case to justify deploying capital into it. And the basis of design is what comes from that phase, right? Hey, I need to have 1 million square feet designed at 475 watts per square foot, and that tells me how many megawatts I'm going to put into it. When I'm done, I'm going to hand that over to a design team. That design team those are the licensed PEs that are going to stamp stuff, right? We don't get involved in design at all. Phase 3 is the delivery and the construction of it. Well, when you go back to phase 1, how do you get ahead of your supply chain if you're going to build data centers? And that's simple. You go land bank. So Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Google, FAMGA, which is Facebook, Apple, Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. and then you add Oracle, IBM Soft Labor, there's probably 12 companies that represent 60 to 70% of the internet traffic in the world. Those companies, they land bank, and all the operators that operate for them, they land bank. So the supply chain for data centers started with land. They go out and they land bank. Then they go out and they standardize on design. Then they go out and they buy all their OFCI, their owner furnished contractor installed, or whatever their vendor management inventory strategy is, the VMI strategy. They got to go out and get lead times. I mean, we're helping clients right now put down deposits in Q3 of 2027 for transformers and engines. So we know the lead time for land, we know the lead time for equipment, and we even know the lead time for energy. People are out banking PPAs left, right, and center right now, right? So the lead time for every aspect of construction has been pressure tested. I can tell you how long it takes to get a UPS system. I can tell you how long it takes to get a PDU. What I can't tell you today, and no one can, is they can't bank labor. There's no colleges that you could go to today to learn about data centers. Whatever you would learn your freshman year would be obsolete by the time you graduated. So how do we build a scalable workforce? And that is simple. We went out and started our own schoolhouse, and it's called Build Now. We'll be launching it next week. The president of Build Now got out of the Navy in January of this year. He's a retired captain. He was an XO of an aircraft carrier. He was a commanding officer of his own ship, but he was a Top Gun instructor as well. So he's been in the cockpit. He's worked around the most elite people. And the guy that we brought in to run curriculum for Build Now is a retired submarine commander, commandant, and he ran the entire Navy nuclear power school. So I brought on the best teachers and the best curriculum writers to standardize on what a data center apprentice would look like. So I'm creating a schoolhouse in Dallas right now. We partnered with a company called Forge Now. Forge Now was started in 2019, just like our company was. It was started by a couple West Point grads, and Forge Now focuses on transitioning veterans. All of their curriculum is approved from the Department of Education as well as the Texas Workforce Commission. And it's a 6-week boot camp. It's ran just like the military, where you miss it 2 times and you're kicked out of the program. But the beauty is you could use your Jet.Build to go to Forge Now, and it'll cover room and board. It covers all the training. And when you're done with our training at Forge Now, you've met a standard certified. You'll be certified in data centers, and you'll be able to come right off the assembly line and go right into any construction project in data centers. And it's a 6 to 12 week boot camp that we're creating for that right now. But it's the only way to make a production force for labor. And now people are coming to us and putting in requests for labor for Q1 of 2027, and they're ordering 50 to 150 people at a time. They're telling us, hey, we want 30 rolling off the assembly line in Q3 and 30 or 40 rolling off the assembly line in Q4. And now we're taking the job descriptions or requirements that they have and writing curriculum around that and leaving it in a training incubator that was started by another set of veterans. And we partnered with them. So we created a whole nother Forge Now, like a Forge Now 2.0. So Forge Now is designed to teach people to get into general construction and residential models in 6 weeks. You add another 6-week model on top of that with us, and now it's Forge Now data centers. So now people come out, they're exposed to data centers and the language and the lexicon, and they know enough to be able to go contribute, right? They have skills that they learn from the military that are translatable and very much desired in this space. So getting into an ability to go build a transparent, predictable university for this industry is going to allow the industry to start banking and having a predictable line of sight to labor. Labor is the only existential crisis in this industry right now. And right now, we don't know how to build people that could go build and operate data centers fast enough. This academy, which is called Build Now, which is the movement, Build Now is like the Got Milk movement for the dairy farmers. People don't understand Got Milk. Got Milk was 25 dairy farmers in Northern California that each had their own marketing campaign and how they sold their dairy products. And they created their own consortium, and then they all put money into it. And they went and they found a marketing group in San Francisco and said, hey, we need to create a movement that'll benefit every dairy farmer. And they did. They created a movement called Got Milk. And Got Milk wasn't one dairy. It was the entire industry. And we saw what it did. Build Now is the Got Milk movement for the data center industry. And it's only focused on building. And we're launching next month. Yeah, you're going to see a lot of press releases and a lot of stuff coming out about it because it's designed to help get as many veterans transitioning out of the military into that schoolhouse to either go left and learn how to build residential homes or go right and learn how to build data centers.
Yeah.
One path will be 6 weeks. The other one is probably closer to 12 weeks. But either way, the GI Bill pays for it. The curriculum is approved from the Department of Education as well as the Texas Workforce Commission. And it allows them to get a job, at least in the state of Texas. And if they could get a job started in the state of Texas, we can move them anywhere else. Northern Virginia is the sky for the cloud, but Texas will be the home for AI. So if we could get people transitioning out of the military, going to Forge Now, and then going to Forge Now DC, we could get them right into the workforce. And we have the best in class people to run that. So, I mean, the president of Build Now is a Navy Academy grad who flew airplanes and was a Top Gun instructor. So my message is this: we have an environment for people, and it's the first and the only official service academy for the data center industry. It's not just designed for me to put my team there. Any company in this industry could send their talent to that schoolhouse to be standardized and trained to come back into the industry and be qualified to build data centers or operate them.
That's awesome, man. That's so cool. You know, kind of, you broke it into two parts, right? One is teaching, just construction generally speaking. Then the next is like the advanced degree per se in AI in general. And as you put it, I mean, labor across the industry is an issue. And now you add the growing demand for data centers, as you've been pointing out, and it just compounds that issue. So it's really cool to hear that you guys are pushing forward with it. I'm familiar already with what you guys are doing, and excited to see all of the releases and also hear kind of the background of that program. So really cool. I'll have information in the show notes as well for that. Kind of closing out the your kind of professional trajectory to date, I want to just give you a moment to really plug in translatable skills. Obviously, we touched on them throughout the conversation, but here's just like a highlight reel per se of military to built environment translatable skills.
I think the most important skill to have today is creativity, thinking outside the box. I think that submariners are linear trained, right? We're trained to check boxes and make sure that everything's good. Combat arms are more abstract trained, right? So I think the emotional range that comes from two sides of two different branches is just one example. We'll tell you that the thing that brings us together isn't what my co-founders learned while being gunfighters is not the same as what I learned being a submariner. But what we both took away from our training was it taught us how to be creative thinkers. The most creative thinkers are going to be the ones that are the greatest value, right? Character is forged through pain, frustration, setback, humbleness. I mean, we're taking people that come from an environment that's constantly being exposed to those challenges in the military and giving them an opportunity to really grow from what they learned, right? So I think the most transferable skill set is this: creativity. I don't care if you were an detective, if you were a firefighter in the military, if you're an MP, you name it, I have them working here. I don't care what you did. You could be a crane-eating Marine. You could be a bullet sponge Army guy. You could be a member of the chair force. Obviously, you could tell that we have a little bit of banter between the branches here, but my reality is this: we have a ton of respect for them. We have a ton of respect for anybody that joined the military, man or woman. The best part about hiring military is it's already diverse, right? I mean, I have a large number of women that work for us. More than 35% of my workforce are also women. I don't care about that. We didn't go out and try to hire women. We just tried to hire the best people. It turns out some of them happen to be women because they come out of the military too, right? I think the military teaches us how to endure pressure, and it teaches us how to think creatively. So your skill set isn't going to come down to your MOS or your NEC or your EIEIO. It's going to come down to your ability to reinvent yourself. And if you have the ability to demonstrate that you had to learn at an accelerated rate under extreme pressure, this industry is starving for you. Right? All you need is an opportunity. And for us, we're just trying to create those opportunities because, again, I didn't create this business to build data centers. I created it to save lives and to change people's lives with new careers. And if that's something that you're excited about, or if this is something that appeals to you, realize this: the fastest path to becoming a millionaire today is through the trades building data centers. It's not through college. So if you're coming out of the military and you're like, I got to go back to college now, you don't. You just need to go find Forge Now, and you need to join the Build Now movement so that we can get you in the game.
Yeah. The trades college.
That's it.
Yeah. So last question around kind of your profession today, data centers and such. I know you talk about this a lot on your podcast, which I encourage people to listen to. why is there seemingly, I don't know that if it's real, whatever, why is there seemingly friction around building data centers in some circumstances?
Oh, great question. And it's come full circle. So let me start at the beginning. When these data centers were first starting, the adoption rate of emerging technology, specifically driven by cloud technology and applications, it was a job creator. And every state of the union was racing to create incentives to bring data center operators and builders into their state.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of people over the course of time I think the data center industry has failed miserably at explaining to the communities that we operate in the value that we bring to those communities.
Yeah.
Shame on us. And look, we are getting our teeth kicked in as an industry for that right now. You go back to 2023, we lost 2 programs in the United States, data center programs, to what's called NIMBY, not in my backyard, right? And the number one concern from them was, what are you doing for energy? What are you doing for water usage? What's the impact on the environment? And what are the jobs that are going to be created? All fair questions. Well, you have to look at what the time is that we're living in right now. AI is transformational infrastructure. And a little history would be this. The very first transformational infrastructure program that ever happened in this country was called the U.S. railway system. And it happened as a byproduct of the number one innovation that came out of the first industrial revolution, which was the steam engine. Think about what we did to ships with a steam engine, from how that had an impact on immigration, trade, warships. Think about how we mechanized factories and brought people from rural environments into urban. How did that impact people getting sick? How did that impact vaccinations and inoculations? And really, the steam engine in the first industrial revolution had the most profound impact on humanity, because it ended up, we created trains, and as a byproduct of creating trains, we put railway lines connecting one part of the country to the next, which ended up resulting in creation of the NFL cities, right? So we were facing massive resistance when the U.S. railway line was being rolled out, because it was the first transformational infrastructure. People were worried about, what are we going to do for energy for these steam engines? What are we going to do for the impact of that it's going to have on the environment? People didn't want railway lines across their property lines. Right. But all the resistance that we have today on AI, we had then. And, America doesn't stop building. We just made them safer and more sustainable. And for all the cities that didn't want to have railway lines in their neighborhood, well, guess what? We went to cities that wanted them, and those cities that didn't no longer exist. Okay, because what followed was the electrification of the U.S. grid, and that is a byproduct of the second industrial revolution. Where in that industrial revolution, not only did we discover powered flight and connectivity, but we really went deep on AC and DC power, and then we took what the Italians built with a combustion engine for tractors, and we converted it into an automobile. When Henry Ford created an automobile, he didn't just create a car. He created an entire sub-economy. And those are the 80% of the ecosystem and the millions of jobs that were created. I mean, think about this. I ate at a Michelin star restaurant last month. Michelin was as a byproduct of the Michelin Tire Company. And they rolled out a catalog of where the best restaurants were, because they wanted you to drive your car more, because it meant more tires. So think about the impact that the automobile industry had on society in which we live in today. Again, transformational infrastructure, the electrification of the U.S. grid, had 2 major concerns. What are we doing for energy, and what's the impact in the environment going to be when we have to put power lines from one part of the country to the next? And we just kind of followed the U.S. railway lines as we did that. You see the pattern. The third transformational infrastructure came in between the second and the third industrial revolution. And that was really as a byproduct of what's called the automobile revolution. So when we started putting roads, we started following the cars as they were being deployed with roads. We started making service stations and gas stations. I mean, there were no auto mechanics. If you had a car back then and it broke down, you went to a bike shop or a fabrication shop and hoped that someone could create a piece or a part for you to fix it. But again, automobiles had the greatest amount of pressure and strain on local infrastructure. They were noisy, they polluted, and people just thought they were dangerous. Sounds familiar to what we're doing today, right? So, I mean, the infrastructure as a byproduct of the automobile revolution is never ending. I mean, you can't go we built 10 highways that ran east to west and north to south throughout the United States. And we're never going to stop building those roads, because the roads are growing more inadequate as more cars are hitting the roads or heavier cars are hitting the roads. We'll never stop investing into that type of infrastructure. It's transformational. But we had the same resistance and pushback then that we have now, which is, what are we going to do for energy? What's the impact in the environment going to be because of the automobile? What are the jobs that are going to be created? And again, it's a pattern. It's a theme. And we see it each industrial revolution, one over the other. You know, you get in the fourth industrial revolution, that was really, again, predicated on power, but that was AI power. I mean, the precursor for all AI started in 1953 when we built the first data center, which was built for and funded by the US government for national defense and intelligence. So we started building technology in what became AI in 1953, essentially. So when we got into technology, think about data centers. There were states that wanted data centers to come to their space, to come to their states, because it was an on-ramp to the internet. And then by 2023, you know, we lost 2 programs. 2024, we lost 4 programs. And in 2025, we lost 25 programs. Listen, that's a huge hit to the GDP. Those are real programs, billions of dollars in infrastructures, and thousands of people that could have been employed and fed their families from these jobs. Now, we suck as an industry of not explaining to people what we've done. Yeah, when we first built data centers, just like when we first built cars, not the safest, not the most sustainable, and not the greatest. The first ones through the wall are always the bloodiest, right? We built data centers that were consumers of the U.S. grid. So in some cases, when that happens, we were large consumers of energy, which at first may spike energy prices, but eventually it stabilizes and drives the price of energy down. Because what happens is when you have a Microsoft or a Google or an Oracle come into your neighborhood and go, hey, we're going to build a data center here, the large base load usage of energy from a wholesale basis drives the entire price for energy down within that municipality, and which benefits the residents in that municipality. Right. People used to be really against data centers because we could build a data center. The magnitude, volume, and velocity and size of data centers grew from this big to, you know, hey, I remember when I first started, a 5 megawatt data center was a big data center. I was losing my mind when we started building 20 megawatt data centers. I remember when I first built my first 75 megawatt data center, I was like, man, this is something. We don't build data centers that are less than 200 megawatts now. Wow. And most data center campuses are on start with a G, 1 gigawatt. So to put it in perspective, when we used to build those smaller data centers, yeah, you'd put thousands of people to work for a year, and then you would leave only a couple hundred people behind to operate it. So people started fighting the job creation and said, you're just stealing our power and you're just stealing our water. And we got ahead of that as an industry about 10, 15 years ago. A guy named Dean Nelson, founder of Infrastructure Masons, he started self-regulating the industry and self-imposing things and said, hey, let's create a charter and let's start being better stewards. Let's not wait for the government to get involved and the community start pushing back on these programs. Why don't we work towards a zero water design? I mean, we don't use water in our cars today because it's simple. Water can't absorb and reject heat fast enough. It'll boil too quickly. So we use some sort of fluid in that radiator because the density of heat is so high, we can absorb and reject heat that way. Well, look, data centers went from 10 megawatts and 20 megawatts to 200 megawatts to a gigawatt. And guess what? We run at such a high density now that we can't use water to reject that heat. So if we do need water in our cooling systems now, we don't use potable water. It's called a zero water design. We use reclaimed, acclimated water that we recycle or reuse in some capacity, some gray waters. We're even making technology not only to harvest rainwater better, but maybe we're able to use brown water in a better way. But we're trying to push the industry not only to no longer being a consumer of energy, we're a provider of energy. We're a partner to the utility. In fact, these data centers are growing so big, they're becoming utilities themselves. And that's a good thing for those communities. Right now, 11 out of the 15 markets in the data center industry in the United States right now are seeing average price increases as a part of inflation. But there are 4 markets that are seeing higher, and that's because the adoption of that technology in those markets is growing high, but the prices will eventually go down. I just spoke at the University of Indiana, Kelley School of Business a few weeks ago, where the state of Indiana and the state of Michigan worked together to drop and reduce the prices to the local residents throughout the state, because the consumers of energy are coming in from the large enterprises and they are buying wholesale energy prices, which is driving the utility rates down, which will eventually be passed down to the consumers. But the mentality is that we are just consumers of utility, where in reality, we are building 40 to 80 gigawatts of energy behind the meter right now. Now our industry is on path to triple before the end of the decade, but before the end of the decade, we'll put 80 gigs of energy behind the meter using just turbines or reciprocating engines behind the meter, meaning data centers are now going to places and not tapping into the grid. In fact, they are reinforcing the grid by building their own energy with the ability to close transition or co-generate back to the grid, which in theory reinforces that grid. Yeah. The other part is we're no longer using their water. In some markets, it's zero water design. There are a few misfit toys in this industry, large hyperscalers, and they are the 800-pound gorillas that I'm not going to go pick a fight with right now. But we use their technology, use their apps, and they don't care. They don't care how much water they use. They just go, hey, we're going to go water positive, which means if we use all your water, we'll give you enough money to go tap another aquifer. That is not the same as not using water. So we are at a stage in an industry now where we need the policymakers out in Capitol Hill, which is why I was out there talking with another CEO to try to tell them that data centers aren't, it shouldn't be not in my backyard. It should be please in my backyard. Now, we don't want to put data centers in neighborhoods. We should build them closer to the power plants so where we don't see them. But we're getting better as an industry at doing that. But the worst part about this industry is right now is you have all these captains of industries. You have to remember, we're working amongst a transformational infrastructure segment that is emerging into the mainstream. Yeah. What that means is we work with the Henry Fords of our industry right now. The people that started this industry are still here. They haven't even fully retired yet. So we are working amongst the Henry Fords of our space. And those people will leave and become policymakers and help making, they'll work with think tanks between San Francisco or Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. to figure out how we could work on market messaging and narratives that go into these communities so that they know that, we may have sucked in the beginning, but we're not that anymore. Yeah. And in fact, we build at such large scale. I'll give you an example. We're going to go build a 1 gigawatt data center. We'll put 4,000 to 5,000 people on that construction project for 5 to 7 years. And that means we'll leave 2,000 people on that site just to operate it, plus another 2,000 in the ecosystem that are going to be there just to do the maintenance and the preventive maintenance or the break fixes. I mean, you have people that make automobiles. You have people that just fix them. And then you have people that only do is use that car to make a living. They're just the drivers. So you have builders of cars, people that fix cars, and people that make a living just driving them, like an Uber driver, right? So the automobile created multiple different type of career paths, and the AI field is going to do the same, right? So right now we are building an industry that has not a 12-month cycle of construction jobs, but a 5 to 7 year cycle of construction jobs. And for the thousands of people we leave behind to operate those data centers, it is estimated right now that it creates 6 new jobs in the community that you live in. Those are domestic jobs. So if we go out to Abilene and we put 5,000 people or 10,000 people on that construction program for the next 5 to 7 years, that means 2,000 to 3,000 people will be left behind to operate it. And for every person we leave behind, they're going to create. So that's 12,000 to 18,000 new jobs in that community. Okay. Those are people that work at the gas station, food service, or the teachers, or the first responders. They're the janitors. They're the whatever it takes domestically. Plus the people that benefit the most from these industrial revolutions, they're the small businesses. We're the largest recipients of that growth because we have the ability to go out and build new jobs. If we can reconvert most of these veterans into entrepreneurs, then they could be the part of the ecosystem that helps not only stop the cycle of suicide within the veteran community by giving them jobs, but they get to contribute and benefit the greatest in their earning potential from these new jobs. So there was a time where every state wanted these data centers in their market. Now we're seeing projects getting shut down left, right, and center, which means it's time for the entire industry to come together with a shared collective or a shared narrative and a message to these communities. We have to engage in these communities and listen to their concerns, because right now the same concerns that people have on AI are: what are we going to do for energy? What's the impact on the environment? What are you going to do for water? And where are the job creations? The same problem we had with every transformational infrastructure program that has been rolled out. And those transformational programs that have been rolled out that have had an impact on humanity, they all came from America. Do you understand? So America is a leader in these transformational disruptions of humanity. And I'm proud of that. And veterans play a big role in that. The small businesses play a big role in that. So right now, we're trying to scramble as an industry to figure out how do we stop the bleeding and how do we go communicate to these communities. Because if you're in a state that doesn't want data centers in it, first of all, if you're someone that uses cloud technology or even AI technology today, and you're against data centers, then shame on you. If you don't want data centers, stop using technology.
Yeah.
Second part is this: don't stop us. Just get the policymakers to require that the data center owner operators and developers build power behind the meter, so they're no longer consumers of the grid. They're partners to the grid and becoming utilities themselves. Get these providers to stop using water or use recycled water instead of potable water, so that there's no concern to the communities. And third, let's help people understand that a data center isn't a building. It's not 4 walls and a roof. It's a career field with unlimited opportunity. Technically, there are 9 different job domains that represent 285 different jobs just in the data center industry alone. You can't go to college for those jobs. You just have to be immersed. It's on the job training. And the only people that thrive and succeed in those positions are those that have the ability to endure great pressure and stress and have the ability to learn at an accelerated rate. I think every veteran, if asked that, could raise their hand, right? So we are battling this not in my backyard bullshit right now, and it's our own doing, which means it's only us that can solve this problem. And the chorus sings louder than the soloist. So having the ability to talk about this with you and your listeners and the other people that we have within our orbit is critical, because we need to transform and change the way that people view data centers. They're no longer a building that consumes their utility. It's no longer a building that doesn't create long-term job stability. It is an unlimited career field where shame on everybody that's not pushing their kids towards the data center industry right now, because this industry will create more jobs than the automobile industry has, and it'll have a greater impact on humanity than powered flight. So we have to work on changing the way that people view these things. And in those cities that were against roads and against the railways and against the electrification of the U.S. grid, they don't exist anymore. And if you're in a state that's against these things, you need to remember you're competing against 49 other states. This stuff isn't stopping. You're just pushing it into another neighborhood that's going to thrive and experience growth as a byproduct of these opportunities. If you're someone that doesn't want them, it's like cutting off. It's like Tiger Woods golfing with one of his hands tied behind his back. It just wouldn't make sense, right? You want to get in the game. You don't want it. What happens as a nation if we decide that we don't want these data centers? Well, guess what? All of those jobs will go overseas because that's where they're going to follow the technology. We already gutted the middle class when we outsourced a majority of our manufacturing in the late 80s, early 90s. This opportunity that we're talking about right now is the data center industry is an unlimited opportunity to rebuild back the middle class, to create small businesses and give veterans an opportunity to reinvent themselves and hopefully not harm themselves. And I hope that I answered your question.
That's a really amazing way to answer the question. I wholeheartedly agree. I think what's really interesting is that people's pushback, it's fair concern, but you can adapt toward the concern, right? You don't have to push it away. Whereas the inevitability, as you put it, is going to exist, whether it's in your state, in another state, in another country. It's just the inevitable future. So rather than pushing against it, just adapt with it, right? Require those, rules, right? Like say, have your own meter and don't use fresh water or whatever the dynamic is. Like it's
have the policymakers govern it in a way in which it doesn't have a negative impact on humanity or society or community.
To push against it makes no sense.
I agree with you, and let me tell you why, just to reinforce it, and then I'll let you bring this one home. I'm sorry to keep you on it, but
no.
You pay attention, and this is to all the soldiers, sailors, and airmen that are listening. We had an operation that took place in Iran just recently. We didn't send troops in there. We used technology.
Right.
This AI is the most advanced weapon machine and tech ever built. And guess what? There's a reason why the Department of War just added $500 billion to their war chest for their budget for next year. It's because they're going deep on AI. This is a part of warfare. This is a national security and defense item now. And who better than those that have served for the Department of War to extend into this industry and transition into it, knowing that this technology, which was primarily driven based on the eyeball content, video caching of us consumers, is now being heavily utilized for national security and defense. The most advanced weapons, machines, and tech ever built aren't going to be found in the civilian hands. It's going to be in the military first. So who better than transitioning veterans who have already taken an oath to come into this industry? And I think they could contribute with the same level of honor and dignity they did when they were in uniform, but now they're serving a different purpose. But it is, again, in purpose of national security and defense. These programs aren't going anywhere because America cannot afford to let China or any other nation overtake us in the usage of technology. Some of those nations that could, they don't share our passion for sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
They probably don't share our views on the world, right? So we have no choice but to maintain the lead. And that's why I'm like, you could push this stuff away, but you need to remember there were still people that were rearranging the furniture on the Titanic for the last 2.5 hours as it was going down.
Yeah.
And if you're against data centers, you're one of them. So if you protest the stoppage of this data center stuff, you're just pushing it into another market that's going to thrive as a byproduct of it. And when that happens, you'll start seeing an erosion of opportunity in the market that you live in, because people are going to go where the jobs are. And the jobs right now, the best, highest paying jobs, like I said, the fastest path to becoming a millionaire today is through the trades building data centers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to go have a higher overall total earning potential, you'll be in the data center game.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we were only talking about really the civilian aspect of it, your day-to-day life aspect of it, which I think is just literally undeniable. And then that's not even to mention what you just brought up as it relates to national security and just the future of what that looks like. Again, undeniable. So it's just, to me, it's just, it's a lack of awareness, unfortunately, whoever's fault at fault.
Hey, listen, if you're listening and you're part of the NIMBY crowd, I hear you. I would be one of them. I would totally be in protest this shit. I'm a tree hugger. But the reality is now that I understand what's really happening, right, I'm all in. And I think that the only reason why these people are protesting is because we kept them on the outside too long. And that's on us. Sure. Yeah. Shame on us. But we're learning. And there's a lot of people that are rallying right now. There are still some that don't want to. They want to keep the proprietary nature of what they think they're doing a secret as much as they can. And in reality, they're only hurting their own future. Every operator right now should be in front of every megaphone they can, talking about why it shouldn't be a NIMBY thing. It should be a PIMBY thing. Please, in my backyard. Yeah. There's too many great things that come as these. And this industry is the only industry that has the capacity of building back the middle class. And I think that we could use veterans to do it.
Yeah, very well. Very, very well said. Last piece on that. Do you see nuclear power being a benefit, or it just doesn't even matter for this equation?
Yeah, the adoption rate of emerging technology today, specifically driven because of the demand of AI, has allowed us to discover that our current generation of energy isn't dense enough. It's untenable, in fact. Mm-hmm. So you will see us using natural gas is a bridge or a stepping stone to get to the safest, most sustainable, and only scalable form of energy we've ever created, and that's nuclear. Mm-hmm. The nuclear Navy probably has 30 to 40 different types of nuclear propulsion power systems today. We've been around for 78, 80 years. This is not new technology. It's just that you had too many people that were able to merge nuclear weapons into nuclear energy, and we have to bifurcate the two. I'm against nuclear weapons too, but I'm 100% for nuclear energy. If you are someone that wants to reduce the carbon footprint, the only way to do that is through nuclear. So it's not if, it's just when. It's a matter of time until we're pivoting into nuclear as a primary vehicle, and that'll ultimately reduce the carbon footprint and drive the price of energy down.
And do you think as like on a micro scale, meaning micro per location, or a more macro, meaning like nuclear for a state, for example, or major city, whatever?
It'll be both. We'll see the AP1000s rolling out, but we'll also see SMRs being heavily adopted. Mm-hmm. We're at the tipping point right now. I mean, it's not a function of economics. Right now you have the federal government creating a backstop to help mitigate the risk for companies that are trying to get into nuclear, because right now, right off the bat, it's hard to guarantee that it'll pencil out. So you have capital markets that are like, why would I go deploy capital into something that takes 5 years to build? And there's no guarantee I'm going to get a return on it when the regulations are all stacked against us. So you're going to see capital markets pivoting. You're going to see the government pivoting and how they reduce the cost to capital or the risk to capital markets. Yeah. The thing that scares people the most is you need a reliable labor force to not only build these things, but to operate them. Yeah. The good news is we have a nuclear power school that the military operates that has been able to prove and demonstrate that we have the ability to operate these things safely, and we could scale. Right. So I think that what you're going to see is another part of the economy emerge, and it's going to be focused on nuclear. And the reason why we launched Build Now was to create Forge Now data centers, which will help us train people that could go right into the data center industry. But the reason why the person that we brought on to run the curriculum for that is so that he could expand and advance that curriculum into nuclear. He's
That's
already,
awesome.
I mean, if you ran the Navy Nuclear Power School, you have the ability to figure out how to write curriculum and train nuclear operators for those other power plants that are going to be coming down the line. It's not if, it's just when that's going to happen.
That's awesome. That's awesome, man. Closing out, before we get to the last two questions, anything I didn't ask that you want to add?
No, I mean, I think your questions have been spot on. I've not been interviewed like this ever before. So I'm normally doing the interview. And so I try to keep most of my stuff. I don't, talking about my cancer, talking about why we started this thing. And it's not something I'm used to doing. So I'm probably a little bit all over the place, but I think that your questions drew a lot of stuff out of me. And I hope that answered most of your questions along the way.
It did. Oh yeah. It's unbelievably inspiring story, man. And I learned a ton out of it. Especially the messaging piece. Like I really hope to see you and the other leaders in the space fix the messaging around data centers, because that needs to happen for sure.
I'm working on it. This is what
I know you are.
Is like, look, all you have to do is get on the field. Get on the field, play goalie, play backfield, play midfield, figure out where you belong. Just get on the field. All you have to do is get in the industry. Once you're in, the growth opportunity is unlimited. Look at me. I was an E-nothing from the fleet, not special. Came out, used the skills that I got from the soft skills as well as the hard skills. And I used a critical questioning attitude to just try to learn as much as I could. I went from being a field person to a field manager to a field director to a vice president to an executive vice president to a president to now I'm in the C-suite. There was no roadmap for that. I was a blind man walking around, just stumbling into everything I could. I made every bad decision you could make, but I didn't care. I wasn't scared of making mistakes. I wasn't scared of failing or losing because I had a big enough engine. I knew I could recover fast, right? So my message to you is you were brave. You were brave enough to take the oath. Not everyone's done it. Less than 1% of the U.S. population has done it. But now we represent more than 20% of the workforce. Be brave. Join a brand new industry and just ask tons of questions as long as you're willing to bet on yourself. And when I say bet on yourself, it means you have confidence that you can work and you can deal with setbacks. And I would challenge you, like even right now, if you go back in time and you look at everything bad that's challenged you, hurt you, or set you back, ask yourself, why did that happen and what were you supposed to learn from it? Because I bet you if you do that, it'll prepare you for the mindset you'll need to be in the data center space.
Yeah, well said, man. That's awesome. Closing out, what does your wellness practice look like?
Yeah. So we do a thing twice a year here at this company, right? So I do a thing called 30-30 for 30, and we're running that campaign right now. We do it twice a year. When I was at the hardest place in my life, where I was mentally struggling the most, I couldn't afford to go to the gym, couldn't afford to do a lot of things, but I could afford to walk. So every day I would walk for 30 minutes out as far as I could go and then turn around and walk 30 minutes back. And I did it for 30 straight days. Sounds easy, but I challenge anybody that's listening to just stop and walk 30 minutes out, 30 minutes back for 30 straight days. The discipline to do that is incredibly challenging, but the reward, the mental reward of being able to do that is priceless. It's worth it. And I did that because in those 30 minutes, I was feeding myself a steady diet of audiobooks or podcasts. I didn't listen to music. I would just walk and I would listen to a podcast that either entertained me, inspired me, or educated me. And I was just feeding myself a steady diet of those podcasts. So for 30 minutes, I'd walk out and 30 minutes, I'd walk back. Over the course of time, I'd notice myself covering more ground. I'd walk a little bit further this time, a little bit further before I turn around. And that is the easiest way to reset my mind. And we implemented that here as a business. Every employee that works here contributes to this. Where a couple times a year, we make it a point to go hold ourselves accountable to doing something that's not necessarily difficult, but challenging or uncomfortable. And we do it for 30 straight days. And then the dividends, it pays dividends. I've seen people change their minds. It almost becomes, as a byproduct of doing that, they started eating different. And as a byproduct of eating different, they started drinking different. As a byproduct of those two things, they started exercising different. And they picked up from 30, and they took it to another level, And my thing is this, is we focus really hard on the mental health of our team. And when they get stuck, we just tell them like, hey, start at the beginning. Something that you can do is you can control what you do for 30 minutes every day, 30 minutes back. So we just keep people locked in and grounded on it's anchored to the tenets of who we are. Reset yourself. It takes 30 days to do it. Spend 30 minutes walking somewhere and 30 minutes back every day, and you'll rewrite the constitution of yourself, right? So I'm a big fan of just walking. Walking will fix the biomechanics of your body. It changes your eating habits, your drinking habits, your sleeping habits. And those are the things that are necessary to change your work habits.
That's awesome, man. I really love that. I always tell people underrated is just walk. If they're struggling to figure out a routine, like don't underrate just walking, even if it's less time, and building yourself up toward what you just said, which is an awesome challenge. So that's really cool to hear.
Changed my whole life, right? Yeah. So, listen, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk about what we're trying to do to help veterans. I think being a builder is the most punk rock thing you could do right now. It's the one thing that everybody has the ability to do. The most important thing to build and manufacture today is an AI factory, an AI data center. Yep. Just realize for every data center that 1 gigawatt data center we build, we have to build 8 other factories adjacent to it just to build all the components and the equipment that need to go into that factory. Being a builder is the path to becoming a millionaire. So if you're listening right now and you're not sure how to reinvent yourself and you're stuck, walk 30 for 30. I challenge you. I've never met a person that hasn't changed their life.
Yeah, well said, man. I encourage that as well. Last but not least, any book or books you'd like to recommend? Could be the same that you've already recommended through our conversation.
No, there's so many amazing books, and we feed ourselves a steady diet, and we feed them out to our teams, and if you're not going to start with why, Simon Sinek, and just listen to the TED Talk. That was the one that started it for me. And then I just started feeding myself as many audiobooks as I could. I'll tell you one that had another profound impact on me that I share with leaders, and it's called Grit. It's written by Angela Duckworth. It's something I give to every leader when they first get here. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to go start your own business, 0 to 1 from Peter Thiel is an amazing book too. It helps you develop a mindset to where if you want to build a business, you're not really building a business. You're building a cult. Think of it like that. You have to have a cult-like culture to build a business that's going to endure the pain and the strain that happens when you build. There's 5 phases of building a company. The first is creation. Creating your own business, that's so much fun. That's where you have no idea if you're going to live or die, but it is the most fun stage so far of entrepreneurship is creation. Stabilizing a business, well, that's where things get bloody. The people that got you here may not get you there. That's when you have to standardize, because standardization is phase 3. And when you standardize is when some of the Wild Wild West antics of startup company, where it's so, ballistic and kinetic, those things go away, because once you stabilize a business, you standardize on it, and you do that so you can optimize it. The only reason why you optimize a business is so that you can scale it. So there's 5 phases of a business life cycle. And you have to ask yourself, some people are just great at being leaders in that first, startup CEOs, and some are institutionalized. They're the ones that are, brought in after a founder already started a business, and they're the ones that are there to homogenize it, right? And there's a need for all those things, but there are certain things in certain phases of your life that you're going to have an appetite for, and you just have to figure out what is that appetite and where do I want to be. And some people want the Wild Wild West, and some people want the stability, and it takes a little bit of time to have both.
Well said, man. That's awesome. Kirk, really appreciate you sharing your story, man, going into depths across, the story of your life. Really inspiring stuff, what you're building. I'm a huge fan, huge proponent of all of what you're doing. Really excited to see you continuing to grow.
Well, look, I'm honored and I'm humbled, and I appreciate that. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell the story. And hopefully there's some people that are listening that maybe they're stuck. I was there. And we all started from somewhere. My advice to you is just to get in the game. You don't have to be great at the game. You just have to get into it. Once you get on the court, once you get on the field, you'll learn how to play.
Well said, man. Kirk, you hang on. Everyone else, we'll see you next time. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.